Ladies and gentlemen, we are all kept alive by the work. Ladies and gentlemen, we are all kept alive by the work of man's mind. The individual minds that still retain the
reveals that you just have to stand. It says over in Ephesians chapter 6 that you take unto you the whole armor of God, having done all things you
How do I turn it? You know how to turn that down?
And there are times that you just have to take the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, of the Spirit, the Word of God, and you just stand and you fight and you have to just stand there until you see a manifestation. Now, I believe that there's things that we can do to speed up this manifestation, but I haven't got time to tell you about it today. I'm going to have to do that on my programs the rest of this week.
So Ray, what? Tell me about where you. Tell me how old are you? How old are you? How old? What are you eating tonight for dinner? A sandwich. So you grew up here in Odd, West Virginia, your whole life. And your
What the
family,
actual
you
fuck
lost
is
your
this?
brother since I was here last.
Come on, Ray, get out on the porch.
Tell me about your brother.
Get out on the porch.
What's your favorite memory, Ray? Do you remember anything about your life?
Hey.
And you lost your other brother. So you lost your brother? Ray's brother
Huh?
Ray and Tim's brother?
No.
Timmy is your nephew.
Oh,
Tim is their nephew.
Tim is a nephew. But there's one of the brothers that's missing now.
Well, one of my brothers died.
That's what I'm saying. Who is that?
Freddie.
Freddie, that's right. Freddie's gone. How long ago did he die?
He's been dead for almost 4 years.
4 years? How did he die?
Huh?
How did he die?
He had a heart attack
Heart attack?
His heart.
in his heart.
So tell me about your family. Your parents. Tell me about your parents.
My parents died.
Of course, yeah, they're older now. They'd be very old. What can you tell me about your family?
Not much.
No? You love your parents?
Yeah, I love my family.
Good family? Timmy, you hiding? So, I hear stories about your family that your parents were brother and sister or cousins or something like that. Nothing like that. But the mental disorder that Ray has, what is that from?
I don't know. I don't know what caused it.
But Freddie and Ray and Timmy are both kind of have that same, and Lorraine too has the same thing. What do you suppose that the cause of that might have been?
I don't know what caused it.
You don't know? Timmy, you went to high school, right?
Get up. Get up. Oh, hi.
Timmy, tell me about what you remember of your parents. Can you tell me anything? Lorraine, what can you remember of your family?
Okay. Hi, are you there? Raskolnikov, you still there?
Yeah, I was gonna go.
This is Boston, Boston Strong / Guac Lesnar showed me this. He said, inbred family.
This shit is weird,
Inbred
especially
family.
no context.
Yeah. If you saw this would already help. Yeah. Let's see, is there any... I wrote Biden news. Let's see if there's anything new here. President Biden and President Trump both hold events over the weekend. President Biden marks the 31st anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Campaign event for Terry McAuliffe, Democratic candidate for Virginia governor. Schmack hides Joe Biden's comically bizarre guest at CNN Town Hall. Oh yeah, that's Sky News Australia. Jesus, I hate Sky. Look at all this shit from Sky News Australia. Look at all this shit. Let's see what they have to say about him, actually.
Sky News is fucking dumb.
This stuff is horrible. I hate clicking on it because then it gives them more visibility.
Now, if the ABC has taught us anything, it is that the media can be ferocious in its pursuit of people who think differently. And in America, we are witnessing this issue played out in reverse as the gushing media establishment moves heaven and earth to make President Joe Biden seem presidential. As Biden fronted the CNN
Liking tends to have more of an effect.
his chief stenographer,
Neoliberalism forever.
And
Hashtag neolib army.
I would have thought it has less effect. I just sort of reflexively downvote Sky News at this point.
You've been the big guy for 6 months
Hi,
now
Weep Loop
in the
again.
White House. Can you take us behind the scenes, something that
Am I
was
Nibula Bro,
extraordinary
Weep Loop?
or unusual that happened
Web
that
Loop,
stands
sorry.
out to you?
Yeah, Mr. President, you didn't close the door. Mr. President, what the hell are you going out at this time for? It's a wonderful honor.
Oh, they're suspending the Trans-Tasman bubble for at least 2 months. They can't go to Australia for at least 2 months. Damn it. Pregnant women of any age now eligible for Pfizer
Well, I
vaccine.
hope I have very good manners, but I'm not very hung up on
Road positive flight attendant February
protocol.
6th. Flights in regional.
And
Queensland.
and the Secret Service is wonderful.
Did you
What
ever
was
get
that?
vaccinated?
Let's start unpacking that
No,
question.
they're not
which
doing it for
was,
people here.
Can you tell us something
For average
extraordinary?
people.
One thing, just one thing that has stood out to you
Did
during
you?
your time as leader of the free world. Could you possibly hand the big guy an easier question than that? But apparently it was too
Yeah.
difficult cognitively for Biden, who started rambling about
Yeah.
times he's being told to
Well, I've already
close
had
the
the
door
virus.
and how often
Mid-May.
he's asked, Mr. President,
I
why
had
are
it.
you going outside? And Don
Which one
Lemon
did you
just nervously laughs along as if it was a normal response. Tragically, it wasn't even the craziest thing to be said at the town hall. In case you missed it,
Rachel
here is the now
Maddow is
infamous
awesome.
moment Biden starts
I got
reading
the
about
Pfizer.
whether there is a man on
Okay.
the moon.
You got the vaccination?
Yeah.
Are you okay? I mean, you seem no, it works. Or you know, or the mom and dad, or the neighbor, or when you go to church, or when you're no, I really mean it. There are trusted interlocutors. Think of the people. If your kid wanted to find out whether or not there's a man on the moon or whatever, something, or whether those aliens are here or not, who are the people they talk to beyond the kids who love talking about it?
Truly wild stuff. And here he is failing to answer basic questions on vaccines.
And the question is whether or not we should be in a position where you are. Why can't the experts say we know that this virus is in fact it's going to be, or excuse me, we know why all the drugs approved are not temporarily approved but permanently approved.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just comically bizarre gaffes. Biden made plenty
I mean,
of
it's just that
factually
he's a bit-
incorrect statements as well, some of which Don Lemon helped him correct in the moment before quickly trying to move on.
I want to say I'm in his territory. There's Portman is a good man. Portman is a congressman from this area. I talked to him before I got, and I really mean it. He's a decent, honorable man, and he and I are working on trying to get this infrastructure bill passed.
But you're talking about Senator Ron Portman of Ohio.
I'm sorry. I thought.
Yeah, no, but
Jeez, talk about a media protection racket. Could you imagine CNN doing that for Donald Trump or any Republican if they made even a slight mistake? And here is Biden falsely claiming that former Obama administration economist Larry Summers isn't worried about long-term inflation, despite the fact he co-wrote an op-ed titled "The Inflation Risk is Real."
People are coming back, and guess what? Instead of paying 10 cents, you're paying 20.
Yeah, this
You
Brit is
understand what
brain
I'm
dead.
saying?
Yeah.
It relates to what, in fact, is now needed because we're growing. I don't know anybody, including Larry Summers, who's a friend of mine,
Yeah.
who's worried about
Ugh.
inflation.
Think of this actually. Yeah. I don't know what. So so it's this town hall thing that he had. So there's a CNN town hall. But for some reason we're not actually seeing the CNN town hall itself. Why not? You get CNBC, CBS. Why? Why are we not seeing the actual CNN town hall? Maybe because they don't want to show it because there are too many gaffes. Do you think it was? Do you think it was that? I don't know if this is. To me, this is. It's just not very interesting to me. I'm looking for stuff that I find interesting, but he just says stupid shit. All I care about is policies, really. I don't care about what. I don't care about whether they're stupid or not or whatever. As long as they just put. As long as they just have proper policies. I'm basically. That is what I care about.
No, they stream it on their site. They want you to have cable or a comparable service. If that title isn't clickbait, I don't know what is. Are Asians smarter?
I just sort of random stuff. Yeah. But no, because we were talking about that yesterday. I've got my sort of racialist people, and so they're talking about that. So that's why I came up with that. Let's see. Oh, I've got some thing in Portuguese here. Not sure I need this. Yeah, no, I don't need this. What do you want? What do you want? I don't know what I. Aaron Brook. Do you want to see some Aaron Brook? But I don't really. Introduction to Objectivism. This is Ayn Rand's philosophy, but this is gonna be pretty tough. I've been looking at this sort of.
Objectivism is the philosophy created by Ayn Rand.
I don't need this.
Ayn Rand was born in Russia in 1905 and educated under the Soviets. Even as a child, she rebelled against the mystical doctrines and oppressive practices of that culture. At the age of 9, she decided she would be a writer. At 13, she decided she was an atheist. In high school, when she was introduced to American history, she immediately took America as her model of what a nation of free men could be. At the age of 21, she escaped the Soviet regime and came to America, alone. The theme of her first two novels, We the Living and Anthem, is the individual versus the collective. In The Fountainhead, published in 1943, she presented for the first time the kind of hero whose depiction was the chief goal of her writing, the ideal man as he could be and ought to be. That man is Howard Rourke, an uncompromising architect who battles a tradition-worshipping establishment. Rourke's independence, self-esteem, and integrity have inspired millions of readers for more than half a century. Atlas Shrugged, published in 1957, is Ayn Rand's masterpiece. It is the story of the mysterious disappearance of leading innovators and industrialists, and of how the world collapses as a result. In Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand dramatizes her unique philosophy in an intellectual mystery story that integrates ethics, metaphysics, epistemology, politics, economics, and sex. Its theme is the role of the mind in man's existence, and, as corollary, the demonstration of a new moral philosophy, the morality of rational self-interest. After Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand went on to define her philosophy more explicitly in nonfiction works, including Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, The Virtue of Selfishness, Capitalism the Unknown Ideal, and The Romantic Manifesto. She named her philosophy Objectivism and characterized it as a philosophy for living on Earth. My philosophy, in essence, said Ayn Rand, is the concept of man as a heroic being, with his own happiness as the moral purpose of his life, with productive achievement as his noblest activity, and reason as his only absolute. The following lecture by philosopher Leonard Peikoff is a brief introduction to the philosophy of Objectivism. Dr. Peikoff is Ayn Rand's legal and intellectual heir. He was a close associate of Ayn Rand for 30 years until her death in 1982, and today is the preeminent authority on Objectivism. Dr. Peikoff has taught philosophy at numerous schools, including New York University and the Objectivist Graduate Center. He is author of The Ominous Parallels and of Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand, which presents all of the key principles of Objectivism, from metaphysics to art, in a logical, hierarchical structure. Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand, is the definitive statement of Ayn Rand's philosophic system.
Good morning. I have to motivate you.
You can tell they're like in the 80s.
Ayn Rand's philosophy, in essence, to you. Why should you care about anybody's philosophy? Why do human beings need philosophy? First, we have to know what is philosophy. Philosophy is the subject which studies man's relationship to reality. That's a capsule definition.
I should read that.
Of 5 branches, which I will put on the board and briefly define.
I should kind of read our shit, but
for a reason. Metaphysics is the branch which studies the nature of the universe as a whole. What is real? How does reality operate? Are there 2 realities? Etc. Epistemology.
yeah, so that's the thing is that
Field of knowledge.
Ayn Rand actually.
How do you know you know? What qualifies as knowledge? What test does an idea have to go through to be able to say, I do know it? Can you ever really know? Can you be certain? All questions of knowledge is epistemology.
Yeah.
These two together give rise to the central, not the basic. These are the basic branches of philosophy, but the central branch is ethics, or morality, approximately synonyms. That's the branch which provides a code of values to guide human choices and action. How should you live? What should be the goal in life? What is right? What is wrong? And then in turn out of there comes 2 derivative branches. One is politics, which is the branch which studies the nature of society and the proper role of government. And I don't think you need an example of that right now. And then coming off in another direction is aesthetics, about which we're going to say only a sentence or so in this brief overview. That is the philosophy of art. What constitutes an artwork? What makes an artwork good or bad? How do you establish the standards? The overall view gives you man's relation to reality, how he knows, how he should live, and therefore how he should govern his most crucial products, government and art. Now, the first thing to see about this subject is that you cannot escape it. You may escape it consciously, but then your subconscious will pick up from the world around you views on all these questions. You may have consistent ideas or contradictory ideas, but this is not like physics or astronomy or even zoology, which you could blessedly live your whole life, never hear about, and never be in any problem as a result of that. All these questions are central to a man living his life, and therefore, in some form or another, perhaps inconsistently, you have a view on all. Take up, for the sake of an example, from the field of ethics. You want to go into a career. You decide you want to be an MD in private practice. Is that good? Is that bad? Your priest or your mother or your mother-in-law tells you this is very selfish. All you're after is money. You should really be a missionary like Albert Schweitzer and go to Africa. Or you should work in a storefront clinic. You should be unselfish. You should sacrifice yourself for others. You have some view. You may have an inconsistent view. You may do one and feel guilty that you're not doing the other, but you can't escape the question, who is to benefit from your behavior? If you try to escape, to switch the example and say, well, who knows these questions? There are no absolutes. Nobody can be certain of anything, and that applies to more than just ethics. That applies to all knowledge, and that comes under epistemology. And if that's true, how do you establish what you call knowledge, or even whatever ideas you do hold? Do you turn to others? That's one theory of epistemology. Take public polls to find out the truth. But how do the others know what to believe? Do they get it from God? Well, God offers different revelations. Do you go by logic? What is logic? What if somebody says what's logical to you isn't logical to me? Do you agree with that? You have to have some idea, or you couldn't even let an idea into your mind.
Yeah.
Suppose you say, well, I don't know about all this. 50 million Frenchmen can't be wrong, and I'll follow them. Well, if 50 million Frenchmen can't be wrong, that means there is no reality. Whatever they say, that will determine the nature of reality. Well, is there a reality? If there is, 50 million Frenchmen might be wrong. Isn't that true? And I don't think I have to illustrate politics and aesthetics. Objectivism holds that one way or another, everyone has views on these questions, on the central questions, and that actually shapes your life and character, and it shapes human history. Now let's look briefly at the objectivist, you're motivated now, hopefully, at the objectivist position on, at least the key position on these issues. Now, under metaphysics, the central word would be existence, or reality. Objectivism begins with the axiom, existence exists.
Mm-hmm.
There is something. What is this something? Nothing esoteric. Everything that you see, everything available to the senses, everything in the heavens down to the contents of this cup of coffee.
Yeah, well, it's realism.
Existence or reality, and that is the axiom on which objectivism begins. What is the basic law of reality? Very simple. The law of identity, formulated first by which philosopher? Aristotle. I thought everybody in this room knew nothing, but that's correct. It's not nothing about anything, but nothing about philosophy. The law of identity says A is A. Things are what they are. If you fail an exam, then however unhappy that makes you, you failed. It's a fact. You might get the teacher to change the grade on paper, but still the performance that's born to the F is still that performance. And this is true of every fact, human or otherwise. So we say reality, it being what it is independent of consciousness. Independent of consciousness.
I would think they more than likely are on average, considering they are far more studious and in the family structure really promote the importance of education.
Yeah, they're more studious and the family really promote. Yeah, I know that. But then, I mean, it's because interesting. We looked at that. We saw that there are these genes that tended to be associated with intelligence, and they tend to actually be quite highly. The prevalence of these genes are actually highly between populations are actually highly correlated with the IQ tests, like the results in IQ tests. So that was quite interesting. We saw this article yesterday, and so that seems like a pretty good example of why actually it's likely that there are average differences between races, which does not really mean much, and of course individually. Yeah, and there's also what you're saying. I mean, but obviously it's kind of even if there are average differences, doesn't make a huge difference. Because it's still, the differences are still quite limited. So yeah, and this is where I had my because I've got this person who, Charles V, he wants to not let immigration because he thinks that other cultures, he thinks that cultures are entirely biologically determined, and that all sort of people of each culture are sort of the clones of each other, and they're sort of interchangeable, and as such, if you bring in people of other populations, they're going to create another culture, and he doesn't want that, and I think that's absurd. But
thus, if 50 million Frenchmen or any number smaller or greater want something to be true, it is not true simply because they say it's true. You can wish, desire, believe, alone or in combination with the rest of mankind, but that leaves reality as such utterly unaffected. It is what it is, A is A, no matter what the content or beliefs of the human mind. Equally, since it is what it is, it's independent of any other consciousness. And the big candidate, if you don't believe that human consciousness controls reality, is the man upstairs, a supernatural being that controls reality, and that's known as God. Now, for the very same reason that we reject the idea that human beings the content of their mind can change reality, we say the same about a supernatural being. So in essence, we say this in metaphysics. There is a reality. That reality is this world all around us. We deny subjectivism. That's the idea that the human subject, simply by manipulations within its mind, can change reality. And we deny supernaturalism, which is the idea that there's some superpower, force, God, whatever, that controls or affects this world. So we are therefore atheists, but also a-gremlinists and a-Santa Clauses. And we're against all forms of the supernatural, only the natural. And the natural world operates how? By causal law, by cause and effect, each thing acting in accordance with its nature. There are no miracles.
As well, they have a strong work ethic wherein they have family members at a young age working in businesses run by the family.
Yeah, there is that, but we saw that there are these genes associated. I can't remember. It's he's called Bruce Lund or something. He had this. We saw this, but I think I killed the page, so I'm not gonna be able to find it anymore. But yeah. IQ results. Look, IQ results by race. So first you see the IQ results by race. And then you see that there's here the unwelcome revival of race.
Oh no.
What?
He has COVID. Just kidding, man.
Maybe I do. Yeah, this is Forbes saying. But Forbes is just saying this is super mainstream thing. That's funny when they're labeled special. Yeah, this is the thing. If the child is labeled special, then the child's IQ increases. Yeah. Yeah, so this is this is funny. So suddenly there's they change policy and suddenly there's way more gifted students among other like stuff. Like, yeah. Yeah. Here's a Asian IQ are growing more than Europeans, and the gap between Africans and Europeans is closing. Anyway, yeah, to me this is if there it's hard to know the actual difference, and if there is a difference, it's minor, and who cares anyway? Because we should be looking at individuals, and we shouldn't be looking at races. So, um, so yeah, who knows? But there could be differences, and we saw that there's a correlation with like some genes that actually are apparently determined or linked to intelligence. So that was an extra argument for why there might be an actual biological basis. But as we see, IQ differences are very variable. So I don't know. In any case, for me, it's just about acknowledging that there could be a difference and not just sort of dismissing a hypothesis out of hand because you think it's not nice. That's really the only value in look at this. And so then the value is that I show to people that I'm doing this, and so I show that I'm not buying into the sort of weird sort of leftiness that denies science.
No use praying because there's nobody to pray to, and even if he could hear your prayers and was there, he can't do anything about it because things are what they are and do what they do. Does this mean human beings are subject to cause and effect? Absolutely they are. But we go on to say that one form of cause and effect is human will. The man does have the power of choice, the power of volition, the power to think or not, and that is the first cause in a whole subsequent chain. Now, let's turn to epistemology. You have a tiny sketch of our view of metaphysics. Epistemology, the key word is reason. Reason. We believe that reason is the only means of knowledge, and thereby we contrast that with mysticism. Mysticism is the view that there is a non-rational, non-sensory means of knowledge. Reason means starting with the senses and then using.
Well, I agree with that. The whole metaphysics and epistemology, I agree.
With the senses, logic, argumentation, you'll get a direct, unmediated insight somehow into reality, which could be faith, one form of mysticism, revelation, intuition, ESP, etc., etc. Now we reject any form of mysticism.
That shit is crazy. This is why you can't argue with like religious people.
Sort of a table of contents of objectivism. Now, reason has three crucial elements that are central. As I say, to begin with, reason starts with the evidence of the senses. Seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling. We regard those as completely valid and as the foundation of all other knowledge. Therefore, we reject out of hand every idea from the early Greeks on up that suggests that the senses are invalid, that they give us illusions, that we can't tell the senses from hallucinations, that if they were Martians, they would have different senses from us, etc., etc. All that is covered in the objectivist literature, but I'm just giving you a blanket viewpoint. On the basis of sensory observation, human beings have the unique capacity to form concepts or abstractions. And Ayn Rand's book, Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, is entirely devoted to how to form concepts. And she holds that concepts are also objective. In other words, they are not a product of the arbitrary decree of society, and they are not a revelation from God, as, for instance, Plato and his Christian followers later held. Concepts are our way of organizing sensory data but they are an objective way, and there are definite rules of forming them, and therefore when you use them properly, you can claim to have objective knowledge. But now to use them properly, you have to put them together using logic. Logic is the method of reason. Logic, of course, was invented by Aristotle, not by objectivism, but we subscribe entirely to Aristotelian logic, the essence of which is you can't have your cake and eat it too. Nothing can be A and non-A at the same time and in the same respect. That's the essence of logical thinking, to put the data together in a way without contradictions. And why can't you have contradictions? Because we're trying to
Only a religious person would drink coffee and water at the same time.
Okay. Hi.
Contradictions in reality. Now, the result of using reason as your means to knowledge is that you can rely on the conclusions that you come to. Your knowledge is certain, and we therefore reject skepticism. Skepticism is the idea there are no absolutes. Nobody can be certain of anything. It's all a matter of opinion. What's true for you isn't true for me.
Well, I agree about this. I agree about all that.
Rational, and that every truth properly understood is an absolute. Even the truth that there are less than 100 people in this room, if you specify time and place, is eternal and immutable for all time. It'll be true that today, in this room, there are less than 100 people. So far from there being no absolutes, every truth is an absolute, but you must use reason to arrive at the truth. Mystics think that there's truth, but you just have to expose yourself passively to the world, and the truth will write itself on you.
Yeah, that's
Skeptics
weird.
think the truth, if there is any truth, is really just inside your head. It's subjective, and it varies from person to person.
That's also weird.
You really can never know an outside reality. Objectivism holds the truth lies in the proper relation between your mind and reality, between consciousness and existence. You have to look out to get the truth, not look in, but you can't just look out and wait for a dogma to strike you, a la mysticism. You have to look out and work, use the correct method. And the method, as I tried to indicate, is observation, concept formation, and logic, rather than just waiting passively for an illumination. And then you will be given guaranteed knowledge. What about emotions, you ask? And we say emotions.
What did you do today, bro?
They are fine, and you should enjoy them as much as you can.
Not much.
But they are not means of knowledge.
How about you?
The fact that you feel strongly that 2 and 2 make 6 does not count. All right, now let us go to ethics. This is a lightning-like survey of the philosophy. And if I had to put one word down under ethics, I would put selfishness or egoism.
And that's the weird thing. That is where we diverge. What do you mean shit? See, that is where we diverge with. This is the philosophy of objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand, which then gives rise to like U.S. libertarianism, and I disagree with. I mean,
didn't do shit.
Okay.
Now, when we get to ethics, we must follow our basics. Epistemology tells us we have to get knowledge by reason, and therefore that applies to every field, including.
But of course, for you, it's the end of the day. For me, it's the middle of the day. All right. For you, it's 9:30 p.m., right?
Therefore, ethics can't be based on whim, on my feeling or your feeling or society's feeling or God's feeling if there was one. The battle today, of course, is God gave revelations. One side says, the other says no, society sets ethics. And we say both are wrong. Both of those are a form of not recognizing that reality is objective and reason is objective. And therefore, when we come to ethics, we have to ask what in reality gives rise to ethics. It's not anybody's arbitrary say-so. What makes ethics necessary? And Ayn Rand's answer is the fact that man is a living being who has to act in a certain way in order to keep himself alive. Now, you might say, isn't that true of animals too? Yes, certainly. But animals don't need ethics because they have no choice, no free will. They're automatically programmed to support themselves and keep themselves alive. Man is not, as witness the state of the world. He can commit suicide, murder, and all-purpose mayhem. So if he is to remain alive, he has got to have man's life as his standard and then figure out all of the means objectively required by the nature of reality in order to achieve this goal. Which leads us to the question, well then, how does man achieve man's life? What is the basic virtue, according to objectivism? Virtue means the kind of action in virtue of which you achieve your values. That's the old initial meaning of virtue. It doesn't mean for objectivism, chastity, and poverty. And the fundamental virtue we hold is rationality, the use of your intelligence, the full use of your mind in thinking and understanding. We hold that man survives by the use of reason. Reason is not at all
I agree.
a side issue for chess players or professors detached from life. It's a vital, practical necessity.
I agree.
It's required to make the earliest tools, to grow the earliest crops. Everything that we have that keeps us alive, medicine, modern technology, you name it, is a product of man's ability to think. And all our disasters and failures through the years is a product of errors which were anti-reason, errors or individuals. Therefore, objectivism, the primary virtue is rationality. And that leads to a whole further series, justified not as ends in themselves, but on the grounds that they are required if you are to achieve man's life. For instance, independence is a crucial virtue. Using your mind to come to conclusions on the basis of your own best judgment, as against being an authoritarian and just mouthing what the authorities around you say. Obviously, that is a corollary or result of rationality, because if you don't think independently, you're really not thinking. You're just copying what other people say. Similarly, integrity, acting according to what you think, is a crucial virtue. Otherwise, why think it if you're not going to act on it? Productivity, using your mind to create physical wealth, is a crucial value. Otherwise, mankind cannot survive. And there are many other such virtues. Who is to be the beneficiary of all of your behavior? Is it somebody in another dimension? No, there's just one reality. Is it society? No, there are only individuals, and each individual has the same choice, life or not. And which choice confronts you? Your life or not. So you, according to objectivism, are to be the beneficiary of your actions. That means ethics of rational self-interest. Each man lives by his own mind and for his own sake, neither sacrificing himself to others nor others to himself. Now, we're given the choice. As it stands today, you're an altruist, you sacrifice yourself for others, and a selfish person is supposed to be somebody who sacrifices others for himself. Cut my throat for you or cut your throat for me. We regard this as a false alternative and reject both sides. We're against throat cutting. We believe that you achieve on your own. If you want something for someone, you offer a trade, and you trade value for value to mutual benefit by mutual consent. And if you practice this type of value, or this type of ethics, you will never have to worry about should I be moral or should I be practical. Now, that whole dichotomy comes from defining ethics as self-sacrifice and then finding that you can't live by it. So you've got to be moral and practical. You're constantly torn, which most people regard as self-evident. But according to objectivism, there is no such dichotomy. Since moral is what preserves and enhances life, it's definitely practical. And the only way to be practical is to be moral. And now that brings us to the main social application of ethics, which is politics. It's simply the application of ethics to social questions. And here I would put down capitalism as a one-word summary. Laissez-faire capitalism. In other words, the complete separation of state and economics, just as we have the separation now of state and church.
Asians aren't smarter.
And this is where
they
I also
just work harder.
This is where I
But
disagree.
that doesn't mean they should be allowed to achieve more, especially since blacks and Latinos are the victims of that meritocracy.
Well, we don't really know. I mean, it's hard. It's extremely hard to tease out. They definitely tend to work harder, but it's hard to really tease out what comes from what. I didn't get the impression just from the people I know that, but why you say they're the victims of that meritocracy? Why shouldn't be? Don't you think that would be racist to
Studies
not
show
let?
they study twice as much. But that's just based on facts.
Yeah, I know they study more, but is that the entire explanation or not? This is the question. And then why do they study more? Could that maybe be based on genetics? I mean, it's obviously mostly cultural, but maybe
It's
there's
racist
also
to allow one race to prevail more than others.
no. That's the opposite. If one race is culturally harder working, it'd be racist to hold them back. You see, it's because it would be racist to think that you should just bring you should just look at races and try to create equality between races and not just look at the individual achievements of people. If people work harder, it's normal that they should then be rewarded more for it. So obviously,
We've made a mistake to base achievement on merit. Other factors should be more important. Equality, for example.
I think that what I think you're just doing a sort of straw man of people that you don't agree with, aren't you? Doing that, you're just joking around, right?
The mixed economy, which is
It's
basically
normal
we have
to
today,
base it
which is
on
some
merit,
fascism and some socialism
but
and
it
some capitalism
became
and
normal
socialism,
as a
all called-
mistake.
I think you're trolling, right?
Tossed into a pot, a melange of conflicting ideas. I mean by capitalism, pure laissez-faire capitalism, where the foundation of the system is individual rights.
I'm
By
not
hasten to say that by
joking.
individual rights, I mean it as the founding
I'm
fathers of this
agreeing
country
with
did.
most
I do not talk about the rights of
universities.
an embryo
I
or
think
a
I
human
still
being
think you're
once they're
joking.
born. And I do not offer them
I know they
the right
do
to
that,
live
but it's
before
weird. And the way you're saying it makes me think that you're joking.
guaranteed job, guaranteed hospital bed, daycare, night care, etc., etc., etc. They have only got the right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and property, the property they can earn by their own effort. And we say that the function of government should be to protect these rights and only these rights. How can you violate these rights? What does the government have to protect us from? Basically, there's only one way to someone to take away your life, your liberty, your property, and that's to initiate physical force against you. Steal your property, tie you up, stab you in the heart, etc.
Joking
There's an indirect
why?
form of force, which is
Is
fraud,
anything I
where
said
corrupt
above
you out of
not
your property by
accurate?
misrepresentation.
Well, it's just a bizarre. It's just well, it's an opinion. You said opinions of yours, and I think those opinions are wrong. It says racist to allow one race to prevail more than others. I would say the opposite. I would say thank you for following. I would say it's racist to try to artificially create equality between races by hurting harder working people and by helping less hardworking
Bizarre.
people.
I'm merely saying what most universities and others say.
You're still doing it against your will. The government, for
If you actually believed in it, you wouldn't be saying it like that.
Bar the use of physical force, direct or indirect, and thereby to keep each individual secure in the knowledge that what he achieves by his own effort is his. He is completely. His rights are inalienable within his own sphere. No one and no group can enter.
But this is where I disagree with this kind of capitalist idea, because at the level of any particular transaction,
Artificially. How
Yeah.
is it artificial if the outcome is based on something other than merit? A real outcome isn't artificial.
well, because then what you've gotta do is create what you're advocating for is affirmative action, right? So that is where you literally give people higher grades or lower grades on their race, right? Based on race. So that is racist.
Yes,
Okay.
of course.
And I would say that it's not egalitarian, it's not, and it's artificial in that sense, is that you're sort of you're skewing the scales and or the data or whatever to achieve your results. But I disagree with
Of course. To right the wrongs that resulted in those races achieving less.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily wrongs. How about the fact that it's just if they work less, then it's just if they work less, it's
Then how did it get
their fault.
skewed in Asians' favor? How is that fair?
They work more. It's fair. If they work more, then it's fair that they should be rewarded more, of course. Now, what would be less fair, you could say, is if you're smarter and then you get rewarded more just from the good luck of being born smarter. See, that would be less fair. But if you actually work for it, then that's fair. But yeah,
Many nowadays would argue that hard work is a dog whistle to the racists.
Except that you just said that they work harder. So yeah. But I would say I kind of disagree with this idea that all the money that you obtain through capitalism is actually fair, because any individual transaction, it's fair, right? But so the point is that
Just because someone works harder means they should take a disproportionate share of the finite spots in universities.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I still think you agree with me. I still think you agree with me. How about that turbo logo?
I do.
Anyway, I think yeah. But I'm looking about objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand, which gave rise to sort of U.S. libertarianism, as it's often called, and I think that the first stuff I agree with, the idea that you should base your knowledge, epistemology, on reason, that there is an external reality. That I do also support market economy is what we're saying there, but
You'd be surprised, however. Many would not have caught on to the above trolling.
Really? I thought it was pretty obvious, but like it's true that sometimes I don't catch on. But I can believe that. I can believe that. But what I don't disagree, my issue with market economies is that some people actually end up being in a position to like sell lots more items. Basically, see what you earn in a market economy is not proportional to how much or how well or you work, So it's not actually just a meritocracy, right? It's rather a proportion to how much value you bring to society.
Nope. Not obvious since it's all the norm. Nothing I said above is outside exactly what's happening now. I just put it in stark terms.
Yeah.
Have you seen the recent book An Inconvenient Minority?
No, I haven't. Is that sort of about that? Yeah, that would be let's have a look. But so my point, my critique of this is that it's some people in a market economy end up being in a position to provide lots of value, but another person could equally well provide similar amounts of value. And so as a result, it's kind of unfair. It's like you've got a monopoly on one of the rare slots, right? It's kind of this, is that they're rare slots, and like you're saying, the finite spots in the universities. But the point is that it's not even necessarily that true that there are finite spots in universities. There are finite spots in like high achieving universities, but anyone can actually go to some sort of higher education if they want to. But when it comes to high earning positions, there are definitely finite spots of high earning positions, and why I feel is disproportionate is that okay, typically people who end up in high earning positions tend to work harder for it or work better or whatever, but then they're disproportionately disproportionately rewarded. So maybe they'll work 20% harder or better than other people who don't make it, right? But then they're rewarded like thousands of times more. And to me, see, that's a disproportionate reward, and that to me is the fundamental issue of the market economy. And
But in a market economy, especially in the long run, a provider has to convince consumers to voluntarily trade their money for the provider's goods,
yeah.
or the provider will fail, eventually, as the consumer votes to reward other providers instead.
Yeah, no, but that basically is why, from just the perspective of pure productivity, from the perspective of what gets produced, you've got a consumer democracy, right? You've got a consumer democracy, and as much as consumers vote with their money, and they can choose which companies to reward, which companies to punish, of course. But what the problem nonetheless in this consumer democracy model is that you're not able to actually choose like regarding your income. You're not exactly able to choose. You are able a bit to choose, right? You're able to choose, if you want, you can like pay, buy stuff at a small company where presumably like everybody's going to have low salaries or
Any
something.
intervention
But
with that voluntary trade is a circumvention of what the masses choose to win.
well, it's not an intervention of that. I'm not suggesting an intervention of that voluntary trade, but the point is that the voluntary trade is only at the level of the purchase. That is, you agree that you exchange a certain amount of money for a particular good, right? But you don't then have any say on what happens to that money afterwards. And this is again the issue of a market economy. You don't have a say on what happens afterwards, and you might want to have a say because you might actually believe in the notion of fairness, and maybe collectively we might agree, and we might voluntarily also decide to agree to intervene in the market
Amazon
in the
doesn't
fairness.
put mom and pop stores out of business, we do.
Yeah,
We harm those small companies when we choose to reward the larger provider.
I agree. And I'm not anti-big corporation. I have not argued against big corporations. And it's definitely true that you choose to reward the larger provider, and the larger provider is obviously just superior, because of the economies of scale that it produces. I do actually support a moderate taxation that would be proportional to the size of the corporation. Because I think that size basically gives you a kind of monopoly, and it kind of prevents other companies from sprouting up, and potentially more better companies, companies which would be better and more competitive if they were allowed to, if
The
they were
larger
enabled to
provider
grow
is
to.
superior at convincing us to trade our money for their stuff.
Yeah, but in part, it's also because once you achieve the largeness, you've got economies of scale. You've got the sort of position that makes you more
But look at
competitive.
history. Those seeming monopolies don't last.
They aren't monopolies. I definitely don't believe that it's a monopoly status. It's just a very moderate monopoly. It's not at all like an actual monopoly. It's more that you
And
just
often
take up.
such monopolies are caused by government
Yeah,
protection.
yeah. But what I'm saying is that a big company has it easier essentially because it's big and it has it easier, and as a result, it stifles the development of other companies to some extent, and which is why I would advocate for just a moderate tax on companies that would be proportional to the size of the company, proportional to its revenue. But of course, it would be a pretty moderate sort of thing, and that way it would just favor smaller companies. You know, uh, if they're superior, smaller companies then would become more competitive with respect to the larger ones, because for now, larger ones are just inherently more competitive from being large. And that is where there's a bit of unfairness with respect to other companies, and which actually would limit productivity and innovation as a result. It's not an actual monopoly. It's not anywhere close to being an actual monopoly. Um, it's very it's
Yes,
very limited.
it's true that the market tends to provide velocity to the larger providers.
And because the larger providers are limited, that means that we have a limited amount of like newcomers and new startups that are uh you know that represent a threat to the larger providers. If you have a tax on corporations that is proportional to the size of the corporation, then what you're gonna be doing is you're gonna be giving you're gonna stop that from happening, right? You're going to stop having larger providers end up hogging the market and being somewhat less competitive. It would actually force the larger providers to become more competitive. It would force the larger providers to really have to stay
But
really
if you look
focused.
at what's happening in recent years,
Mm.
the big core are buying smaller brands, who were mom and pop startups.
Yeah, of course they can also do that, yeah. And big corporations can definitely do that. And it still doesn't actually lead to monopoly, in fact, because again, if they actually start doing the quote price gouging where they raise prices, that would make the smaller companies more competitive once again. And so at the worst, you're simply going to lose the advantage of the economy of scale from a big corporation.
So, there
So
really is quite a lot of opportunity for startups to profit greatly, as they take risk and build a brand that a big corp values.
no, there is a lot of opportunity, but I would say that there could be more. There could be more, and the way to have more would be like I said, to tax corporations in proportion to their size. And then it would have to be clear, what the limit of a corporation is, right? And would have to, just make sure that a corporation doesn't declare itself like
Could
a
be
bunch of
more if
multiple
what?
entities.
Tax corporation success more?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It would actually work better if you tax the corporation in proportion to its size. It would actually, because then once a corporation has achieved a large size, it ends up like, yeah, it ends up benefiting for it's like it sits on its laurels, right? It's made an achievement, and now it can afford to kind of give a bit of slack to its productivity, and it can afford that and still be more competitive because of the advantages of its size, and that makes it a bit less competitive, and that just kind of slows down the market somewhat. So that is why it does make sense to tax the corporations.
Did you see
on
the
on
recent WSJ article about corporate tax? And how the smart countries keep corporate taxes low?
Okay, but then that you're talking about more about the concept of like fiscal evasion, or like tax evasion, and that corporations obviously they'll go to a place where they're taxed less. But in an ideal system, you don't have separate tax rates, right? I would want to see the same corporate tax rate everywhere.
WSJ is owned by Amazon.
Yeah. And is that true? I think that seems true, but I'm not entirely sure anymore. Um. Yeah, I didn't say I want large corporate taxes. I think it just should be the kind of tax that puts large corporations on an
It
equal
was an
footing.
op-ed, not an article.
I think larger corporations should be taxed so that they end up being on an equal footing with startups. That is they're already successful by being big. They shouldn't be doubly successful. They shouldn't be then rewarded by being on top of that more competitive as a result of their success. I mean, they should be, you know, they should have to compete on an equal footing with the smaller corporations, and this is why it's actually fair to tax larger corporations more. They still get to keep their largeness, so they still, succeed in that sense. But they should be taxed in proportion to their size, and then you just have to make it clear that you have to report. You can't like pretend that you're a bunch
You
of.
have to be very careful when you tax core. It certainly sounds and feels good, but the indirect impact, and history, is deleterious.
You don't have to be very careful. Like you can tax them a bit. And what do you mean by the indirect impact is deleterious? Look, there's need for tax revenue somewhere, right? So you got to tax it somewhere. This is an ideal form of taxation because this kind of taxation that I'm talking about, it doesn't even harm the economy at all. In fact, it benefits the economy to do it like that. And it would actually harm the economy to not tax corporations in the way that I said, to tax precisely this sort of unfair advantage that is conferred by largeness. But again, it's not. It wouldn't be. It would be sort of moderate. Like the biggest corporations might be
I
taxed
never
like.
said not to tax
Yeah.
them at all.
I would say you'd tax. You'd have a 0% corporate tax on small corporations. That's what I advocate for. And then like the very largest corporations would have maybe like a 20% tax or something like that. But that would be a 20% tax. like, because literally that's kind of the difference, the typical difference in price, would be something maybe along those lines, maybe even more. But and it'd be a tax on the other hand, not on the profit, but on the revenue. And this again, so that is actually could be considered a large tax, but it would not actually be a problem because, as I said, you have 0% tax on all the smaller corporations. So the whole idea behind this is that it just ensures that the big corporations really are competitive. I mean, in the sense that they're actually, producing more value than the smaller corporations. It's really about that. And so, like, if a corporation wants to to stay the top, it has to actually be literally better than other corporations, and not just because it's bigger, right? It has to be intrinsically better, based on other things than just already being big. And that is economically beneficial. That is a tax that most taxes harm the economy. This actually benefits the economy.
What you propose, a 20% confiscation of revenue, circumvents the reward that consumers chose to give to those companies.
Yeah, no, but of course, but they didn't choose to give it to those companies, okay? They chose to purchase at those companies because the prices were lower, but those prices were lower because of the economies of scale from that company. But the point is that another company, if given the chance, could have done even better than that company. If it had been given the chance to reach that size, it could have maybe even done better. But the point is that it never was given that chance precisely because the market space was occupied by this large company. So it makes absolute sense. And this is the idea of, it's like in part like Pigovian taxation, right? It's like the taxing of negative externalities. That's like the principle behind a carbon tax. Is a principle behind like a tax on junk food, a principle behind like the subsidy of healthy food, a subsidy of like fundamental research. It's saying that the price, just the market price, doesn't reflect the actual full societal costs of a particular good. And what we're saying is that essentially the lower prices are achieved through of a big corporation. The reason they become more competitive is typically mostly because of economies of scale, but those economies of scale are achieved only as a result of being in this position that kind of keeps other companies out, precisely because you're big, so you've occupied a large share of the market in your particular field, and because you've got these, because you're big, you're able to have these economies of scale. But it's not because your company is intrinsically better necessarily; it's only because it's bigger, and so that there's no actual merit in and of itself of being big. Now, the fact that you became big, sure, is because it probably was better, but it's not. Then once you're big, you can still afford to. Then you can afford to precisely be less productive and still benefit, from just the economies of scale of being big, and that is not the optimal outcome for the economy. So the 20% confiscation of revenue on the highest corporations, on the largest corporations, that would actually end up making the marketplace more competitive for everyone, and it would end up making it more productive. This is this is the concept of Pigovian taxation of negative externalities. In this case, there's a negative externality of being a big corporation, and that is that you can basically just sit on your ass and not really do much and still get to outcompete the other smaller companies. And so that is a negative externality. It means that the economy overall is going to be less productive as a result of that. And so you're taxing that fact. This is again, taxations on negative externalities are an ideal form of taxation because they essentially don't hurt the economy. So compared to other taxes, so any tax you can get like that is really ideal. Tax on land value, same thing. Land value tax is an ideal kind of tax. I would support also small taxes on financial transactions to limit speculation, because again, speculation is not actually useful for the economy. Of course, investment is, of course, but like as a result, like rapid, transactions all the time like that is what mostly would end up being taxed, and that is not particularly useful, and it's often harmful indeed. And then there's yeah, like I said, tax on like carbon tax on things like junk food. I think that definitely makes sense too, right? You're covering the societal cost. Like junk food makes people sick, but the people who then that will raise medical healthcare costs for everyone. But that's not taken into account in your pack of candy that you buy. But it should be. When you buy your pack of candy, you should have the cost of the illness that on average would get produced by eating that amount of candy. And so it makes sense to tax it. Of course, alcohol would be the same. I'm almost considering you could almost, yeah. I mean, any drug, if you're going to legalize it, then it makes sense to also do the same to cover the societal costs. But yeah, that and so all those taxes are ideal taxes, in fact. And so those are really the first tax. If you want to have any taxes, you should have those. And then beyond that, I mean, I still advocate for more because you can't have all that much tax revenue from just those taxes. You wouldn't be able to cover like all the sort of the expenses necessarily that you might want, especially because I support a basic income. So with with a basic income,
because sugar is the largest health threat of modern times, even worse than tobacco, I agree with you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and of course, and of course, tobacco and whatever alcohol, of course, should be taxed the same, right? That is obviously that. Now, I support basic income, so basic income is quite expensive if you want to do it well, and so to fund that, you would need additional tax revenue, and so I would have a flat income tax. I'd have a flat income tax on top of that, so that would be
Amazon was
the only.
invested in by high rollers. Amazon was first made with the intention of underselling everything else, losing money for 5 years, till they got rid
slow.
of the competition,
I think I'll turn off this
till it
speech
was
chat.
the
I'm sick of it.
source for online book sales. Then it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of true. And like, yeah. So what you need is to tax larger corporations for the reason I explained. Yeah, and so you could do, yeah. So Amazon typically would be targeted by those higher taxes. So it makes smaller businesses. It just put it on an equal footing with smaller businesses. So I advocate for flat income tax as well. So that is an economically harmful tax, but I think labor is actually relatively inelastic, which the sort of labor to wage sort of is curve is relatively inelastic. You see, predatory pricing is illegal but hard to prove. Yeah, but it's not all that it's not all that huge anyway. Like you can't do it. You can't really do all that much. In fact, you don't even you wouldn't even necessarily need, especially if you tax, like I said, you wouldn't need to make it illegal. I think that's really all you need, and then you don't need any other, you don't need any antitrust laws if you do what I said. Who's a higher IQ, the Jew or the Asian? Yeah. Well, apparently, yeah. Apparently, like Ashkenazi Jews are those who get the highest IQ. But then, again, to what extent is it genetic? To what extent is it cultural? We are seeing that there's higher prevalence of certain genes associated with intelligence among those people. So it could definitely have a genetic component to it, but also would have a cultural component to it. Ashkenazi God's chosen people confirmed. Yeah. I saw an interesting theory, which is how it was apparently a result of how the Ashkenazi sort of economic, family unit worked, and it basically, like, the successful families had lots of kids, and at the same time, the kids had to be smart to make the family keep going. And so, is it irony that Ashkenazi got slaughtered by the Nazis? Well, kind of, yeah, because they were the actual, like, quote, master race, if there was any. But of course, that's why. That's why they were hated, right? Is because they're smarter, so they did better. And so everybody says like, they're these weird people that are destroying the world and stuff. But no, it's because they're smarter, and people basically it was resentment. It was resentment by the dumb Germans towards the smart Jews. You see, Yeah, that was what it was really. Um, so yeah, anyway, I was just saying like personal income, the thing about personal income is that it's like I think it's relatively inelastic. Like people work for relatively low wages, right? I mean, people are working for tens of thousands a year. You don't need to pay people hundreds of thousands a year, let alone millions or tens of millions a year to make them work. So as a result, you're not really going to see all that much of a decline in productivity with an income tax. So that is why income taxes are actually relatively high income taxes I consider to be quite acceptable. Do you think black people tend to have lower IQ if judged as a group? Well, certainly. Well, we know that they do, but then what is the result? Is it just because of culture? Is it that they study less? Is it that they're not somehow as familiar with the questions or something? Or is it actually that they're less smart? They're actually less smart. Like they definitely have lower IQ test results. But is it because they're less smart, or is it just something else? That's hard to know. But it's true that if you look at the genes that there's certain genes apparently responsible for intelligence that are, less prevalent among like black people. But there are definitely plenty of really smart black people. So I don't think it means much. Like Obama, he's like Harvard person or whatever. There's like some of my black classmates. They're so in any case, it's silly. Who cares if they're a bit less smart as a group? It's meaningless because ultimately we shouldn't be doing racialist policies anyway. Like we should just be looking at the capacities of the individual, and if an individual black person is smart, then that person should be treated the same as a smart person of another race. You say the smartest person you know is black, Thomas Sowell. I don't even know who Thomas Sowell is. I don't know. I don't know much stuff. Thomas Sowell. Economist, political philosopher, social theorist, and senior fellow at Stanford's University Hoover Institution. Okay. Okay, what has he done? I should read some of this stuff. Okay, economic and political ideology. Okay, he sort of has an eclectic sort of thing. Generally advocated a free market approach to capitalism. He opposes the Federal Reserve, arguing it has been unsuccessful in preventing economic depressions and limiting inflation. So he opposes Marxism. Okay. Let's see what else is he. Man, I'd like to know more like specifically about policies. Favor decriminalization of all drugs. Occasionally writes on gun control. Okay, he's not in favor of gun control. Race and ethnicity. He thinks it's systemic racism untested, a questionable hypothesis that piece of propaganda pushed on the American people. Yeah, I don't like the term systemic racism. I see that there's, persistent disparities in socioeconomic outcomes means interracial socioeconomic outcomes. I don't think systemic racism is the right word. I don't know who Thomas Sowell is. Yeah, I don't know. Why would I know? Yeah. Yeah, he says like it's not unique that the things that black people faces. Yeah, and yeah, I agree with this. Mm. Okay, so looked at this stuff about people who talk late. Okay, politics. Okay, says W. Bush was mixed bag, honorable man. He was critical of Donald Trump, endorsed Ted Cruz. He says he would vote against Hillary Clinton. He said, really? He said if Joe Biden won the 2020 election, it could signal a point of no return for the United States, a tipping point akin to the fall of the Roman Empire. Okay. Okay. So he defended Trump against racism. Let's see. Okay, it talks about the importance of education. Okay. Yeah, well, I should read this. I should read this shit. So he's got some books and stuff, I guess. I don't know. I guess I should look at Thomas Sowell. Of course, I was looking at this other stuff before. Yeah, so you say he's close to 90. Yeah, it looks like he must be about 90. You say if goal is having an inconvenient and fight correct search for manipulation and corruption, what should be the best medium for exchange of value? I think almost all the modern conflicts are about resources and money manipulation. I think fiat currency is okay. Honestly. I don't think it's that much of a problem. Personally. I think there are other bigger problems than the manipulability of fiat currency. Let's see, what was I looking at? So yeah, we're looking at objectivism, and then we're looking at introduction to objectivism. Leonard Peikoff. Was I looking at something else? Then get rid of this maybe. An inconvenient minority. Who is this by Kenny Xu? I guess you'd say. Okay, so the Asian Americans are an inconvenient minority. Let's see this. Did you read it? Hi, Sablorbala. Good morning. Good morning. And welcome. I'm just looking at stuff. The attack on Asian American excellence and the fight for meritocracy. Okay, the Asian American minority, transcending its impoverished history, has quietly assumed mastery of the nation's technical and intellectual machinery and become essential to the workforce that makes modern American life possible. Yet they've been forced to do so in the face of policy proposals written in the name of diversity that serve to exclude them from the upper ranks of the elite. Yeah. In An Inconvenient Minority, journalist Kenny Xu, who has covered the sensational Students for Fair Admission versus Harvard case since its inception, traces white America's long-standing unease about a minority potentially upending them in the race for group status. Their policy proposals, such as eliminating standardized testing, doling out racial preferences to non-Asian minorities, inflaming anti-Asian stereotypes, and lumping Asians into privileged categories despite their deprived historical experiences, have forced Asian Americans to fight back, a battle given a boots-on-the-ground perspective here. Going beyond the Harvard case, Xu unearths a skewed logic that has had ripple effects throughout the U.S., from Mayor Bill de Blasio's attempted makeover of the New York City specialized school programs, to the battle over diversity quotas in Google's and Facebook's progressive epicenters, to the rise of Asian American political activism in response to unfair perceptions and admission practices. Yeah. I know they're doing that. They're doing racism against Asian people. I know that. Okay, so you read it on, you saw it on podcast. So why exactly you choose a topic that tends to trigger leftists? I can add some negative stereotypes about them as well, just by step. Okay, yeah, add some negative stereotypes if you want to. I like to trigger leftists. Because my policy proposal would be considered ultra left by actual sort of conservative type people, since conservatives are worried about globalism, and I like globalism. So They think that they think that there's some sort of Jewish conspiracy of New World Order, child raping and blood drinking alien reptilian elites, and so the point is you gotta get them to trust you by talking about other stuff that they typically like to talk about. You're saying California got rid of the SAT because racists get blacks and Latinos and favors whites and Asians. Yeah, I know that. Did they actually get rid of the SAT? But is there still an equivalent test or not? Oh, can you close the door?
Open a window otherwise?
No. Look.
We're quiet. We're leaving. She'll be free.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. Asian equals smart, conservative, happy. What is step 2 in the discussion? Biden drink blood. Alex Jones correct. Yeah. You wrote yes and no just chatting to Twitch. I don't know what you got to say what you're referring to because there's too much lag. You can't just say yes and no. Asians aren't a proper acting minority. What do you mean they aren't being lazy and stupid enough? I guess that's what we're saying, right? They work too hard and they're too smart. You find a lot of them are more woke. They don't play the victim loud enough. Yeah, also that. Yeah, Biden drink blood. Yeah, you gotta say. So the point is, I'm not gonna say that. See, I can't say that, but as a result, I've gotta cover these topics, and I believe in it. I think this affirmative action stuff is stupid. I think this systemic racism term is stupid. I think that the BLM concept is stupid. Which doesn't mean that I don't think Black Lives Matter. Of course, of course, I don't want black people to get killed and stuff. Hi, Shelsunk. Yeah, I was just talking about the stuff that we were talking about before. So yeah. I mean, this is the issue. It's like, oh, you don't think Black Lives Matter? Like, you think they should just be killed by the police? Like, no, I don't think they should be killed by the police. It's like, that's not the point here. But the point is that it's not true that blacks are being disproportionately targeted by the police. It's not true that they're being over-policed. It's like that is not true. But yeah. You say black people are killed often. In one recent weekend, 78 shot in Chicago, no one knows. Yeah, but not by the police. But because it's not by the police, nobody cares. As long as it's not by a white cop, then nobody cares. Do you think McAfee was killed like Epstein? Again, McAfee. That's what I'm going to get the antivirus. Yeah, I'm going to do the antivirus. Let's see. I hadn't even followed this. So I'm just looking at, yeah. And he was actually concerned about this. That's weird. But why would he think that? See, I haven't even followed this. Yeah, so dead in his prison cell. He said if he was ever found dead by hanging, it would mean he was murdered. Yeah. Okay, so because of what? Because speaking out of corruption in government agencies. Yeah, okay, so it's looking likely. For some reason I didn't. I guess I don't get the problems. I don't get the news because I don't have a sort of automatic news page, so it doesn't pop up. I should get back to I should have my, because I've got my email on Yahoo, but it doesn't like automatically like come up, so I sort of miss it. Let's see. Yeah, so it's looking likely that he was killed. Yeah. You say since defunding the police, little girls are shot dead in drive-bys. No one cares. Yeah, no one cares. As long as it's not by the police, it doesn't matter, right? As long as it's just by regular criminals, it's okay. You say yes for a title, but maybe they're less complete than white, for example, in inventiveness. Yeah, but again, to what extent is that culture, and to what extent is it genetics? That's kind of hard to know. I mean, yeah, obviously that's true, but yeah. You say just chatting to Twitch. One little girl is eating a Happy Meal, shot dead. She won't have a statue erected for her. Yeah, yeah. And meanwhile, George Floyd, everybody remembers George Floyd despite him being a money laundering drug addict. But you know, never mind. Thanks for lives. That makes me improve English. Yeah, you're welcome. You're not used to speaking English often, so it's cool. Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. I'm glad you're liking it. I'm glad that you're coming by often. So yeah. You say McAfee did not file taxes and promoted cryptocurrencies. Yeah, but why? I mean, is that really my point? Is that why would you murder someone just for that? Like, right? He already was in prison, right? So at that point, he could be, he could be forced to pay taxes. Like, why would you kill someone just for that? Um, I don't understand. I don't I don't understand why. Like, because then, okay, so apparently he was criticizing governments and stuff. But yeah. You say you don't use RSS. I don't even know what RSS is. I don't know much stuff. I'm a dumb fuck. What are you kids gonna do when the US dollar crashes? I don't think it's gonna crash, actually. You think it's gonna crash? I do not. It would have crashed a long time ago if like what are you talking about? Is like because of like quantitative easing or something and deficit spending? Is this what you're talking about? I don't think it's gonna crash. Banks create a huge amount of money. They're the main source of creation of just more money, right? It's through like loans and stuff. Um, you say that culture favors their genetics. Yeah, yeah. You say I'll be around in Twitch chats pertaining to you. Haha. Some people are crazy. What? What are you talking? Oh, you're looking. Oh, because you're a mod and now you can get to see the unban request. Is that what you're talking about, Charles? Charles? McAfee knew too much. The Illuminati had to take him out. Lol. I don't believe really in the Illuminati thing. Like, we can't know for sure. Please let me know if you'd like to learn about RSS. It's probably the best productivity tip you'd hear all year. Now it sounds like you're trying to sell something. It sounds like some sort of sleazy ad for but I think I'm too dumb to be able to even like be able to use this. Okay, a user keeps track of many different websites in a single news aggregator, which constantly monitors sites for new content, removing the need for the user to manually check them. News aggregators or RSS readers can be built into your browser, install a desktop computer, or install a mobile device. Honestly, I just think like my Yahoo news feed would be enough, probably. I mean, it gives you the basic stuff. It's not like Yahoo's incredible or anything, but I think, it would still. Yeah, this shit. See, this kind of shit. I think I'll just go back to having like just checking my the news, or just like I could check the New York Times. Who cares if they're biased? It still provides news, right? Let's go to New York Times, since I've got my super cheap student account to the New York Times. I will just have it open. Here we go. Am I signed in? No, I'm not signed in, am I? Okay. I'll just take it off briefly so I can sign in without you seeing my stuff. Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay, so I just have to, so I am signed in, but I just cannot account. Maybe I can change my username because right now I've got my real last name on it. So if I accidentally click on the account, if I accidentally click on the account, I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna have everybody know my last name, which I don't want. I mean, I don't really care so much. It's not even so mean, but it's for like the other people that share my last name. I don't want people then to be targeted like based on that. So let's see. McAfee claimed that fiat currencies are used to control people because the government can print as much as they want and they control it. He promoted decentralized anonymous cryptocurrency to take power away from the money. Why are you saying that, Nathan? Yeah, the unban request, MK Ultra. No, I sort of vaguely remember, but I don't really know. But yeah, there's a bunch of crazy sort of people there. You say actually RSS is free. RSS is pre-Twitter and way more productive. Okay. Basically 95% of sites have an RSS feed that you subscribe to with a free service, and then you can browse 10 times the articles way faster. Okay. Well, look, if it's just something I could like download, then that sounds like good, but otherwise. Do you work out? I wasn't and took this resolution since a few months. It's so satisfying. Recently I've stopped, but like I did it in the past. So yeah. Let's see. But I can understand that you'd rather use a news browsing practice that is slower and less complete. Yeah, because I don't know how to use that shit. Okay, if I can that you subscribe to, look, if you say workout is great, everyone should work out and train for upcoming civil race war. Come on, there's no upcoming civil race war. All the best Asians use RSS. Just saying, I'm not an Asian. Okay, I'm just a dumb European. I don't know how to. It's my first time accepting the post of a message. Yeah. Oh yeah, that thing. Yeah, you add permitted civil race war. Yeah, that's funny. Look, if I was an Asian, I would tell you to teach me to do RSS, but since I'm not, I'm not gonna. That's not for me. I can't do it. You say white people are the best at war? It's crazy. My chats are always full of white racialists. Well, because I don't just basically, I don't completely dismiss them. Okay, other people are just gonna be like, oh, you're a monster, and like for saying any stuff like that, and so they leave, and for some reason I don't know, there's maybe not enough like actual white racialist streamers or something for them to go to there, so instead they go to me. Yeah, but this is what I was hoping for, actually. I was really hoping that, because my whole point is I want to get everybody on board with my stuff. And so obviously it wouldn't work if I just had like leftists on my thing. So you say I'm not even a white racialist, I'm just trolling and testing the boundaries of what's acceptable. If I just have leftists on my thing, it wouldn't it would just create more divisions, and that's absolutely not what I want. Um, yeah, it's nice I enable real free speech. Well, sometimes I get pissed off and I ban you, right? But then I unban you, so it's still pretty much free speech. The banning is not it's not really so much it's not a silencing of speech, it's more just showing that I'm pissed off. Um, so yeah. I mean, I've unbanned everybody who didn't try to get me banned. I've never kept anybody banned. And so don't like if they're unbanned, like for now, if you see unban requests, don't just unban everybody, because some people try to get me banned. So you gotta yeah, you can't unban those people. You can't unban those people, but anybody, yeah, if they just say stuff, I think I banned you for something. Really? Yeah, that's possible. But then I unbanned you. I only perma-ban the people who try to get me banned. Um, that's the only For some reason, the login to the New York Times isn't working, which is weird. I was trying to do that, but it's not working. I don't know why. What I could say here, whatever been permitted elsewhere. Well, there are like other like conservative streams that talk about this kind of stuff, right? You do realize this, right? I think the thing here is that I may be the only stream that supports UBI where you can say this. Yeah. I'm the only pro UBI streamer where you can say this kind of stuff. But beyond that, it's not all that exceptional, right? It's not. I mean, you've got your what? I mean, there's a bunch of them. You got rid of the ban. Okay. Immovable Wisdom King, did you? Yeah, I don't think vegans are still trying to get me banned, so yeah, that's good. If you can find any people that I forgot to unban, but it didn't look like they're trying to get me banned, then that is correct. To do so. But yeah, the problem is that now it's sort of, yeah. Did you? Can you tell me what you saw? Because first I don't even know where you're seeing this shit. To moderate a chat room, I don't even know where you're seeing this shit. So basically, the directive is don't just it's laissez-faire, right? Is Adam Jensen? I did not ask for this. Oh yeah. But well, if you want, I can unmod you if you want. In the mod display, I don't even know where the mod display. How maybe can I find my mod display? How to find my own mod display? I don't know where it is. How to find my mod display Twitch. I don't know how to do this. To access mod view, click the sword icon in the bottom right hand corner of the chat panel in any channel you moderate. Bottom right hand corner of the chat panel. Okay, well I don't have that. I don't have that. He literally said vegan's bad and you banned him. Okay. So you can see the... Okay, yeah, I was pissed off because there's a bunch of people saying that. Yeah, I didn't mean to keep him banned, so I forgot. Take your fat dab right now. Don't do it. Drugs are bad. Drugs are bad for you. Don't do it. Why am I have no idea how to see my mod display. So yeah, but you shouldn't. You shouldn't do it. It's bad for you. And then you'll be sick and then it'll make my health costs rise and I don't want that. Oh, here show icons for moderators. No. That's not what I needed. Oh, here, revisar solicitudes de quitar ban, because I got it in Spanish. Okay, so solicitudes de quitar ban. Uh-oh, and now I'm hearing myself.
Okay,
What?
so
Oh, so this is the mod thing. Now I'm finally seeing my mod thing. Uh-oh, and now I'm hearing myself. What?
oh, so
Man,
this
it's
is
still
the
not.
mod thing.
I'm
Now
still
finally
not.
seeing my mod thing.
I can't even scroll down to the bottom of this. So this is so poorly done. I can't even scroll down.
Man, it's still not.
I'm still not. I can't even scroll down to the bottom of this. So this is so poorly done. I can't even scroll down. I'm still not. I can't even scroll down to the bottom of this. So this is so poorly done. I can't even scroll down. I don't know. So yeah, just review if you want to. Okay, since I can't do this properly.
Okay.
If you want to, you can sort of review stuff. If it looks like they,
I don't know.
if it
So,
looks like
yeah,
they were
just
being like
review
really
if you
sort of
want to.
trolling and try to get me
Okay,
banned,
since I can't do this properly.
then
If you want to, you can sort of review stuff.
uh-oh, and
If
how
it
do I
looks
get
like
out
they,
of mod thing
if it
now?
looks like they were being like really sort of trolling
Oh
and trying
no.
to get me banned,
I can't do this properly.
then if you want to, you can sort of review stuff.
Crap. Man, the only way I could do it was to kill. Oh no, did I kill it? No. Okay, no, refresh chat. So yeah, it's weird. It's not really practical. Okay, so I managed to find it, except that still doesn't work really well. Yeah.
You say you're mad at a guy talking about rapists and pedophiles. He seemed to be reasonable. Okay, yeah. Again, just have a look, because some of these people, they do it to try to get me. You rejected a guy talking about beating black people. You think calling for violence is the limit? Don't necessarily. Again, my directive here is really just look at the sort of past comments and see if the person was trying to get me banned. If you can sort of see from the way they sort of do it, if they're, I don't know. I mean, I've got a sort of feel for this. This would have made me banned. Yeah. Okay. This is my only, basically the only thing. If they try to get me banned, you don't let them. Otherwise, if you think it's on purpose to try to get me banned, if it's accidental, then you can still unban them. But if it looks like it's on purpose to get me banned, that's yeah, if there's that, yeah, so that kind of stuff, yeah, then you keep them banned, because then that's obviously when they insist with that kind of stuff, then that's because they're trying to get me banned. So if you've got people like that, then you just keep them banned. That is the way to do it. Otherwise, you unban people. Yeah, because sometimes I forget to unban them. I think that's the problem. I forget to unban them. Okay. What do we do now? New York Times. Why is it not working? Okay. Ah, fuck. Ah. You didn't see anything. This is exactly the problem, what I was saying. This is so stupid. Like, don't show my fucking name on this thing. Hopefully people weren't looking too much. New York City and California to require vaccines or tests for workers. Government workers in the country's most populous state and largest city will have to get vaccinated or tested for COVID-19 weekly. Okay, so you're still not forced. You can also just get weekly testing. So that's not too bad. Let's see. They're expanding the vaccine studies of 5 to 11, Pfizer and Moderna. Here, shunned by GOP, Cheney and Kinzinger seek answer to January 6th riot. What do you want to look at? I think New York Times is, it provides lots of information, so I think that is pretty good. You say answer moderation duty to ban calls for violence. Twitch can ban you for letting things like that happen. Yeah, I know that's the problem. That's why I need people to mod for me. Is because of that. Let's have a look by this. They've been isolated and ostracized by their party for accepting Speaker Nancy Pelosi's offer to sit on the special committee investigating the Capitol assault. Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy how Republicans now, they're not even willing to have a look at this. The investigation is likely to become a powerful platform for Representative Liz Cheney of Wyoming, who has been ostracized by Republicans for denouncing former President Donald J. Trump. I don't know why. I mean, Trump, he literally denied that he lost the election. This is crazy. The Republicans have gone crazy. Yeah. Outside the White House on Monday, the eve of the first hearing to investigate the Capitol riot, Representative Kevin McCarthy had an insult and a threat for the two members of his party daring to participate in the inquiry into how and why a pro-Trump mob attacked the Capitol on January 6th. He derided Representatives Liz Cheney of Wyoming, a staunch conservative and member of a storied Republican family, and Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, a six-term congressman and Air Force veteran, as Pelosi Republicans, referring to Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker who chose them to sit on the special panel investigating the assault. As a minority leader, he suggested he might try to strip them of other committee assignments as punishment. Around the same time, Ms. Pelosi made it clear that the pair would have prominent roles in the proceedings. Ms. Cheney would be cast in the spot traditionally played by the ranking member of a committee, afforded the chance to make an opening statement immediately after the chairman, Representative Benny Thompson, Democrat of Mississippi. She's the only principled person. You think that the Nathan L, on the other hand, is literally a person who's claiming to be me and trolling and being me. Are you sure that's a good idea to unban the Nathan L? It seems to me that the Nathan L was somebody that a person who does that is a person who's trolling and trying to get me in trouble probably. So I'm not sure that's great, but Anyway, maybe just yeah, depending on what you see. Depending on what you see. The divergent moves reflected the unusual places in which Miss Cheney and Mr. Kinzinger find themselves as the investigation gets underway. Ostracized by their own party and embraced by Democrats as the only Republicans willing to demand a full and bipartisan accounting of the worst attack on Congress in centuries. You said I think he was just a troll, no troubles. I think you're just silly. Okay, okay. I'll let you make the judgment call. I mean, I'll have to do that in any case at some point. I mean, I can't, you know, if I can become more successful, I won't be able to moderate everything, so I'll need other people to take care of this. You say it was only months ago that Mr. McCarthy himself said that President Donald J. Trump bears responsibility for the mob violence. Senator Mitch McConnell, the top Republican, warned that following Mr. Trump's lies about a stolen election would lead to democracy into death. Wait. Yeah, okay. Okay, wait, so who... Wait, so who's McCarthy? Oh yeah, it's this one. Oh, but he himself said that, but now he doesn't want to investigate, so it's weird. Okay. But despite the injuries, blood, and death of that day, which threatened to end the United States' streak of peaceful transfers of presidential power, Republicans quickly fell into line behind Mr. Trump. Some deny or downplay the violence, others embrace conspiracy theories about who is to blame, and many simply push to stop talking about the riot. Republican lawmakers who had once demanded answers voted against forming an independent bipartisan commission to investigate, with only 35 in the House supporting its creation. Even the 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Mr. Trump have mostly stayed silent. Only Ms. Cheney and Mr. Kinzinger, who have continued to be vocal in denouncing the former president and the violence he inspired, support the creation of the Select Committee. I really hope Cheney was the article relative to the stream title, or is the title just flypaper? Hi. Yeah, it's kind of fly paper. We did talk about the subject. No, it's not related. I mean, now we're talking about the Republicans trying to, have a committee on about Trump and the bad stuff he did. I mean, Shal, if you want to link again, I lost it now. But the article that you sent me regarding those two genetic markers of intelligence, which seem to correlate also with IQ test results. If you've still got it and you want to link it again, markers of intelligence, racial IQ test results. Here, research on group differences in intelligence, a defense of free inquiry. In a very short time, it is likely that we will identify many of the genetic variants underlying individual differences in intelligence. We should be prepared for the possibility that these variants are not distributed identically among all geographic populations, and that this explains some of the phenotypic differences in measured intelligence among groups. However, some philosophers and scientists believe that we should refrain from conducting research that might demonstrate the partly genetic origin of group differences in IQ. Many scholars view academic interest in this topic as inherently morally suspect or even racist. The majority of philosophers and social scientists take it for granted that all population differences in intelligence are due to environmental factors. Their present paper argues that the widespread practice of ignoring or rejecting research on intelligence differences can have unintended negative consequences. Social policies predicated on environmentalist theories of group differences may fail to achieve their aims. Large swaths of academic work in both the humanities and social sciences assume the truth of environmentalism and are vulnerable to being undermined. We have failed to work through the moral implications of group differences to prepare for the possibility that they will be shown to exist. Yeah. Yeah, this is weird how they're saying that. They're like literally saying that it's yeah, they've been fired, physically threatened apparently, who have been talking about genetic differences. That is crazy. That is crazy. They say he concludes in a society in which racism and sexism were absent. The question of whether whites or men are more or less intelligent than blacks or women would not be merely meaningless, they would be not even asked. Virtually no scientific hypothesis besides race and sex differences is rejected in this way. Yeah, that's weird. Why? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The left has become anti-scientific. So, oh yeah, except it's in French. It's in French. Thank you. Yeah, I gotta remember that. And it was it's an Asian guy, right? Bruce Lan. Yeah, I actually remember the name. Let's see what we can see about Bruce Lan. So yeah, because it's in French, I think I won't like reread it because it was pretty much. So this was back in 2006 that he had this sort of issue about this. Okay, yeah, this gene MCPH1. And his research also suggested that the newly arisen variants of two brain-sized genes, ASPN and MCPH1, might have been favored by positive natural selection in recent human history. This research provoked controversy due to the finding that the positively selected variants of these genes had spread to higher frequencies in some part of the world than in others. For ASPM, it is higher in Europe and surrounding regions than other part of the world. For MCPH1, it is higher outside sub-Saharan Africa than inside. He has advocated the moral position that human genetic diversity should be embraced and celebrated among humanity's greatest assets. Okay, so this was what it was about. That was the gist of the article. Using genetics to explain social phenomena is anti-scientific. Much of the left is anti-scientific in a different way, but genetic determinism is still anti-scientific. That's not true. To deny any role of genetics in differences between groups is anti-scientific. That is obviously anti-scientific. Anytime you just deny anything for no reason, that is anti-scientific. To say, I don't even understand how you can claim that it's scientific. Of course it's scientific to take factor into account. To say that it's the only factor would be wrong, of course. Of course it'd be wrong to say it's the only factor, but nobody's claiming that it's the only factor. I mean, Shal is claiming it's the major factor. I don't agree necessarily, but
one thing I like to point out,
is this him?
often when I'm talking to non-academic audiences, but I think what I'm about to say is maybe even sort of thought-provoking for people who are already in academia. If you look at the United States in its totality, there are several thousand, believe it or not, several thousand institutions of higher education that can award an undergraduate degree. And by and large, these institutions all do a pretty good job. We want to do a good job in teaching. We want to be well above the average for those thousands of institutions. But by and large, they do a pretty good job. And the material they teach, if you think about it, can be found on Amazon in the form of a slightly used older edition of a textbook that you can buy for $5.
Yeah, I've been saying this for saying why university degrees could be way cheaper. This could be incredibly cheap. Like tertiary education, I don't think should be state funded, but I think we should accept degrees that are just where you just have a test. Like you literally say, just learn this material, and if you succeed at the test in this material, you get the degree. I think you should do that. It would make higher education so incredibly cheap, and it literally would teach people the same thing as instead of having these incredibly expensive degrees that keep people in debt. That is the way to solve it. Not government funding of incredibly expensive universities, but instead just have degrees that are inherently really cheap and that get recognized. Yeah. Or not even recognized, right? It should be up to companies to accept people who have those sorts of degrees. You just have universities that do this.
I can buy the slightly out-of-date older edition of any standard undergraduate textbook, and I can probably get it for like $5.
The reason that college is so expensive is ridiculous.
Why do I emphasize that? I emphasize that because what those people are teaching in their undergraduate classes is knowledge that is already crystallized. It's already been discovered by somebody else. It's already been vetted by a whole academic community. Somehow it's in a textbook now.
You say it's not incredibly expensive when you look at the whole GDP, just pay for it. No, don't pay for it. It's a waste. It's a waste of money to pay for education when education actually doesn't cost that. Like literally, it's just a huge waste of money. They're paying for like professors and classrooms and all sorts of stuff that absolutely does not need to be paid, and it just completely useless classes that people don't even need to follow to be. It doesn't provide like good, proper sort of. It doesn't make a person more well-rounded, particularly. It doesn't make a person more proficient at a particular profession. Much of higher education is completely useless. It's a complete huge waste of money. So just do exactly what he said. Just have people, and that is large. I mean, largely I studied medicine just based off of Wikipedia and shit. Like I didn't even listen in my classes. That I could have gotten my degree without even having any of any classes. Literally. I could have had no classes. I could have just read stuff on like Wikipedia and UpToDate, Okay, up to date, you'd have had to pay for it if I was on my own. But I could have read just shit on Wikipedia. Could have bought a couple textbooks, like I did buy a couple textbooks, and that's it. It says YouTube channel is a transformation channel. You should look at the videos when you have time. Well, this one here, Cercle Cobalt. Okay.
Discipline. We all know that they generally, by and large, don't. But if they had the self-discipline, they could buy that.
You say, I like where you're going with wanting to equalize education for everyone, but it's not that expensive to pay for an education system. And yeah, read Wikipedia too. Education is nowhere near too big a social expensive to cut. It's totally worth it. But the thing is that some people, they maybe don't want that kind of education. They don't want university education. Education should be free for kids, right? For kids, not tertiary education. Tertiary education should just be made cheap by accepting degrees where the person just like studies from like textbooks and like online stuff and then just does an exam. Basically, you should be able to get a degree just from succeeding at an exam. This is my point. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be $50,000 a year and then the government be paying $50,000 a year. Imagine that's huge, $50,000 a year. Imagine if everyone did that, like everyone, $50,000 a year. Think about it this way. If you've got a 4-year course, it means like 1/20th of the population is doing it. So you'd have like 15 million people in any year. In any year to have 15 million people enrolled in just undergraduate college. 15 million people times $50,000 a year. So that's sorry, I'm really slow with this. So it's like uh 750 billion. Okay, $750 billion. That's like the military spending. The U.S. military, the equivalent of the U.S. military spending would have to be paid just for undergrad if everyone went to college, just to pay for undergraduate classes, right? It would amount to 4% of the GDP. 4% of GDP just for like undergraduate college for everyone. You say this video is amazing, recorded on YouTube playlist. Okay. It can be beneficial to you learn as part of university structure. Also, the amount people pay at universities currently isn't what the cost has to be necessarily. Yeah, but my point is that the cost could be like almost zero, right? Because it literally could just be a test. Like literally, you don't have to learn at a university structure. I disagree. It can be a bit beneficial, but it's not worthwhile to have the government pay for it. It's it's a waste of money. It's a waste of tax dollars. Like it's tax money is precious. Tax money is precious. Thank you, Charles, for agreeing with me. Tax money is precious. Don't waste it. Don't waste your tax money. So yeah.
Book off of Amazon and read it and get a pretty good understanding of that level of material. The question is, who creates the new knowledge that will be in the textbooks a decade from now?
Mm.
Well, now you're not talking about thousands of institutions in the United States. You're talking about maybe 100 institutions, maybe 50 institutions in the United States, which are concentrations of world-class research talent.
Right.
Oh, this
and
is Stephen
there
Money now.
are, I think, some studies that show fairly conclusively that IQ is a much stronger, like, but significantly stronger predictor than race for escaping the bottom quintile of income.
If you want to test theories of how discrimination works, actually, I had arguments with a sociology colleague of mine many years ago about this. I said, look, if you look at there's something called NLSY, which is the National Longitudinal Study of Youth. And it's been going since, I think, Patrick Moynihan. So probably like more than 50 years now. So you can track individual kids, their IQ scores. And you can ask, like, for a kid born in the bottom quintile of family social economic status, what is the probability that they escape the bottom quintile, or they make it to the top quintile or the middle quintile? And you can ask, well, conditional on IQ, what's the
So I think the end result would be a less educated workforce was just pacing for everyone's education.
It turns out.
Yeah, but in any case, the education that you learn in undergraduate classes is not like useful. I don't care if they're less educated, because it's not. It's just and it ends up being just some knowledge on a specific field. It doesn't actually make you a more well-rounded person overall. That's the purpose of like primary education, or like secondary education, not tertiary education. Tertiary education is specialized education, so it doesn't actually make people sort of these, savant, erudite people that are sort of, more, more like have more wherewithal overall. It doesn't do that. It doesn't do that. So there's not really any point to it.
That if you take black kids and white kids born in the bottom quintile, but you match them for IQ, they have almost identical probabilities of getting out.
Yeah, this is why. Okay, this is great. This is exactly what I'm saying, and this is why why there isn't systemic racism. Like literally, they say there's just like we see that there's a persistent interracial disparity in income and wealth, and they'll be like, oh, it's systemic racism. I'm saying like, no, there is that fact, but calling it systemic racism is just wrong, and I just keep saying it's wrong. It is wrong. It's not. It just implies that you use a completely different definition of the word systemic in racism. It's like, I don't know how to say this, right? It's like you just completely change the words. It's like I'm saying that I'm wearing a dress, but no, I'm wearing a jacket, right? I'm wearing a jacket, but I could call it a dress, but then it would just be a complete different meaning of the word. So if you just change the meaning of the word, then yeah, we've got systemic racism. Just like right now, I'm wearing a dress. If you just completely change the meaning of the word. Yeah, this is a great video. How do you actually save? Let's save this. You're right. Oh no, but then it's saved to my own videos. No, I don't want to do that. That's weird. I guess watch later. That's weird. I can only save it to report. I bet this video has been reported by a bunch of people. Well, no, because it doesn't have any views. But
So my sociology colleague, when I showed him this data, was just his jaw just hit the floor, and he kind of sort of refused to believe it. But then he sort of looked more carefully at it, and he couldn't refute it. And I said, doesn't this at least put some kind of bound on the level of racism that you think is existing in society? Because wouldn't we be able to detect it very easily this?
Yeah, and I had this really weird conversation, and unfortunately nobody was there when I was doing this, but this really weird conversation with this guy who's super aggressive towards me for saying that it wasn't justified to give reparations to rich black people who never lived under any kind of discrimination, and like that it was totally racist to just give out money to all black people just on the basis of their race. And he said that like I'm racist for this, and they're just completely crazy. And so this is why I get people like you, Charles, on my channel, because you're actually bizarrely more reasonable than actually these quote anti-racist people who are actually yeah, a French racialist that is not even white. A little channel of a French racialist. Oh, transhumanist that's super dominant about racist. Okay. I'll be interested. This sounds interesting.
Way, if in fact life was so hard for the black kid, how could it be that just by matching IQ scores with
like I'm not I don't know even what you mean by French racialist. I mean, am I a racialist for recognizing that there seems to be differences in IQ between races? I mean, I don't call that racialism because for me the racialism is what the left does. It's saying that you should treat that it's racism. For me racialism really is racialism. What do you mean no? Yeah. Well, in what way is this other person racialist? Like what in what way is this person like in what way is this person what are the policy positions of here the Cobalt Circle? How would it differ compared to mine? Because see, I would say that the racialisms is either people like you or the leftists, which to me is a kind of the same thing. It's about treating people differently on the basis of race. And I don't advocate for that. You say racialism is the fact of considering that people of different races should globally live in separate continents. Okay, for me, racialism is about then you're not a racialism. Okay, for me, racialism is more about saying that you should treat people differently based on race. Okay, and that is actually racism. Okay, but yeah, that is what you call racism. So I would say that most modern leftists are racist. I would say, and you are too. But the point is that you're not more racist. Like you get called racist by the leftists, but to me, you're not more racist than the leftists. So which is why I get in just as much. You say racialism is different than racism because it doesn't apply hierarchy of races. Okay, okay. But I like this idea of racism as being as being this idea that you treat people differently on the basis of race, and that was sort of racialism for me. Is that you treat people as for me, racialism is about treating people as sort of members of a group and focusing on the collective identity rather than the individual. To me, that's racialism, and that is what leftists do. That is what leftists do, and that also is also what you do.
A white
But for some reason, the leftists actually get more. They get more angry.
kid from a similar family environment, they have equal probability of getting out. So
that, and I just want to give you this quote. It's from the great infoproc.blogspot.ca, which we'll put a link to below. Once one accounts for the AFQT score, the entire racial gap in mobility is eliminated for a broad portion of the distribution. I wonder if you could just step people through that statement.
Right. So that's sort of what I was saying. So imagine that you have this huge data set where you've followed.
We're saying general hierarchy: a black owes less or more than a white. Racialists consider that there are differences, for example, on IQ and musculature, but not a general hierarchy. Okay. Okay.
Huge 100,000 kids for 50 years, something like this. Is U.S. government funded study that's still on.
Yeah, but see, this my point is that to me this is kind of, it doesn't make more sense, right? Because if you've got a person like a scrawny, like low muscle but high IQ black person, I don't see why I should treat that person on the basis that on average black people are like lower in IQ and higher in muscle. You know, it doesn't make sense. To me, I would treat a high IQ, low muscle black person the same way that I would treat a high IQ, low muscle white person. That to me makes more sense. That's why I am anti-racialist, but I guess is that what you call like race realism? I guess maybe I consider you should not treat individuals differently. Okay. Okay. But don't you think it would make sense, for instance, to imagine a black person from Africa, for instance, who happens to have a mind like a white person, a typical white person, right? A person, that has the mental traits of a more stereotypical white person and the physical traits of a more stereotypical white person, despite, of course, not like being black, but especially mental, right? Imagine a black person that has the typical mind of a typical European person. Don't you think that black person actually belongs more in Europe? Don't you see what I mean by that?
So pick out all the black kids who scored 100 on their IQ, effectively exactly 100 plus or minus 1 point on their IQ test.
Yeah, you see, to me the problems of democracy only that demography. Yeah, but don't you see what I mean? Why does that person belong to Africa? See, that doesn't make sense. I think that person does not belong to Africa. Although of course I don't think anybody belongs anywhere. But why would that person belong to Africa?
And then take all the white kids who scored 100 plus or minus 1 point on their IQ test, and then also only look at the white kids who are in the bottom 20% in the population for family income and education, and also take only the black kids who are also in that lowest quintile for
yeah, African genes. Oh, so you're saying that maybe that person's children are still more likely to be typically like African in mind? Is it sort of like that? Is it like if you have this black man, maybe he himself, his mind happens to be more like a European, but he has like recessive traits that could then be passed on to children, to his children, and those traits would then, those children would then still be less high like in IQ. But even then it doesn't really make all that much sense because like lots of the traits on intelligence aren't that recessive apparently, because we know that typically if you have smarter parents you're more likely to be smart yourself. So at that point I don't really see why you wouldn't want it. Like at that point it's really just an aesthetic thing, right? At that point it just becomes wanting to preserve the French or European look It's not even about preserving European intelligence. It's just preserving the European look at that point. You say you can choose to adopt European culture if he wants. I don't mind, as I'm not talking about individualities. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, but why couldn't he also move to Europe? Why couldn't he move to Europe? If he has the mind of a European, and if we presume that either he doesn't have kids, or we presume that his kids are going to be also probably more likely to be European minded, why wouldn't you want that person? At that point, I would say it's just an aesthetic thing, right? It's just really about keeping the look of European people.
As family SES, and then just ask what's the probability that a given white kid with those
Okay, so it implies they moves to Europe, so you're not against that? So you're not against a European-minded African person moving to Europe? But aren't you worried then about the look? Because I could concede that, you're attached to a particular look. I mean, I can understand. You're not against the assimilation of individualities, but how about the long-term issue of like miscegenation? What do you think about that? The fact that people, that you might lose the typical look because everybody is mixed. Is that a problem to you?
characteristics got out, and let's say the probability is like, actually, if you have average IQ, almost everybody got out. It turns out. It's kind of funny. If you're a libertarian, you love this data because it shows like, if you're stuck down there, actually there's some problem, right? So almost all the white kids who had IQ of 100 got out of the bottom quintile, and actually almost exactly the same probability, the same fraction of black kids who were born in that bottom quintile got out.
Okay, you say, I don't care if there are 95% of the population that stays European genetically. Okay, apparently, for instance, in Portugal, Portugal, apparently they say that like 10% of DNA is in Portuguese people is African DNA because of like African people that got brought back from the Portuguese colonies. But the thing is, the point is that it gets spread into the whole population. So is that because it would, over time, that is what would happen. So to you, is that a problem? That like there's, Portuguese people are like partly black, or like look at Brazilians, for instance. Like most Brazilians are mostly white, but you can see there's a bit of Native American. You can see that there's a bit of black person in there as well. So would that be a problem to you? Because that would be. You say it's not a problem as it's not that important in Portugal. Okay, so how about Brazil? How do do you know what Brazilian people often look like, right? They look mostly white. Most Brazilians look mostly white, but you can tell there's not all of them. Some of them are just completely European, but there are lots of Brazilians that you can see that there's this sort of African, component to the look, and like yeah. So you say because there have been a lot of mixes. Yeah. So would that be a problem to you? Because Brazil still has lots of people that look very, very European, but there's also many people that look like primarily European, but you can also tell that the face looks a bit different, right? It looks a bit Africanized. So would that be a problem to you, or not? If the culture still stay the same, for instance, like yeah.
If their IQs were also 100. And if you do this for different IQ scores, the two curves are almost sitting right on top of each other. So it's almost as if IQ is the number one driver for much bigger than all the other effects like race for whether you get out of the bottom quintile. And this is not disputed data. This is extremely solid data with huge sample size.
And it's been around for a long time. And this is, given that blacks in America are an average of about give or take a standard deviation below whites and a little bit further than that below East Asians, they do less well. But if you take a slice of East Asians or Ashkenazi Jews or Inuit or whites with an average of 85 IQ, they all do about the same. And I think what the market is fundamentally measuring is not skin color or hair texture or anything like that. It's measuring G. The market measures G, and that is very difficult for people to say. It is something that I've said on this show for years. The world is scarily more fair than you think it is. And that is something that's very challenging for a lot of people to accept.
Well, it's fair, but it's not. It's still fundamentally unfair. You say, I want in European countries that the major part of the population stays European. In Brazil, what happened is that lots of blacks has been incorporated to the Brazilian society. You don't want that. Okay, but why not? Because you said, what if the blacks actually all were like European type, the quote Oreo, Oreo, right? The term is like they're black on the outside, but they're white inside. What if like you just had an immigration of lots of like all the quote Oreos in Africa migrated to Europe, and as a result you had like lots of black people in Europe, but it was all the sort of Oreo people who like had a mindset like a European. Would that be a problem to you or not? Because like in Brazil, it's just a bunch of random black people, right? But you say it can't happen. Okay, yeah, I know it can't happen. Yeah, I know. But just like theoretically, if it was possible, if you did like some sort of test, right? If you did some sort of IQ test and some tests on like values and stuff to see like to just select only those people, don't you? What would you think? What would you say about that? You're not before that. Okay, so then again, that brings us back to the aesthetic aspect, right? You say, of course. And so it's the aesthetic. Okay? It's that you want to preserve the aesthetic and not just the culture. And not even just the genes. Yeah, but it's not just it's not just the mind that's determined by the genes, it's literally just the aesthetic that is determined by the genes, right? So it's literally just the appearance. So you have an attachment to the appearance of the European, right? Not just even if the people have the mind of a European, you also want the people to have the appearance of a European, which I can understand. I can understand that. But like I've said, with transhumanism, that no longer becomes a problem. Black people can just have white kids if they want. They can just have totally, you can have two, people from Nigeria, but they then have a kid, but through genetic engineering, that kid then just looks like a typical French person. You could do that. This is why, to me, that I mean, we already have in vitro fertilization, right? You say I also care about the European, but to me, you can't dissociate genes and how you think. You mean the look? You also care about the European look? I'm not so convinced. I think there are black people that definitely think like Europeans. Okay, and I think it's mostly just IQ. I don't think there's, I don't think there's really just all Africans have a very distinct way of thinking. Yeah, European look, but and you can also with transhumanism affect the way people think. So you can just have black people immigrate, and then you can just have them have white kids. How about that? Yeah, because that soon we'll be able to do that. I mean, people at first they're like, "Oh, in vitro fertilization, that's super weird. That's creepy and it's like it's Frankenstein and stuff." And now people do it all the time, and nobody thinks twice about it, right? Nobody thinks twice about in vitro fertilization. I think that this is going to be the same. You do this, and it's obvious that it's that you should intervene in your zygotes genes so that your kids don't have diseases. So you make sure that your kids don't have that your kids don't have defects, right? To me, that makes sense. Why would you have a kid that has defects when you can get rid of the defects? To me, that would it would be criminal. It is criminal. I think once we have the technology to do so, it would be criminal to make kids that have defects. So it'd be criminal not to engage in transhumanism. Again, it's not about growing weird people. It's not growing about people with wings and tails and purple skin. It's not that. It's just about getting rid of the defects. It's not about making people like they are now, but better. Not sort of. You say by in vitro between the same ethnical people. Yeah, but you can also do in vitro between. No, but my point is that it seemed weird to people, right? At first, it sounded really weird, and then people are like, "Okay, that's no big deal," right? This is what I'm saying. So my point is that genetic manipulation will also be looked at. At first, now it's looked at as weird, but then it'll be done, and then people will wonder at how anyone could ever have been against it. This is my point, because it's obviously better. It's obviously better.
Bonjour à tous. Lors de mon passage chez TEPA, que je salue,
If
j'ai
you 2%
annoncé un projet
non-European
qui
in
me
Europe
tient à
and your
cœur.
accent doesn't change, that's
Je
perfect.
souhaite créer un cercle de
Yeah, but do you understand also that Europeans aren't even at the maximum IQ? Wouldn't you want there to be wouldn't you want their Europeans to become smarter? Wouldn't you want to be able to Europeans to stop aging? Wouldn't you want everybody to be able to live hundreds of years and remain young? You don't care about max IQ? I think you kind of should, because precisely low IQ makes less productive societies. It slows down the economy. It leads to violence. Like Europeans, to me, are still like a pretty dumb race overall. I find Europeans to be pretty dumb overall, and I would want to improve them. Like to me, Europeans are definitely not the sort of the pinnacle of evolution. I I think there's definitely lots of room for improvement, you know. So you don't have to change their look, but you could definitely increase their IQ, increase rationality, get rid of all diseases. You say okay for max IQ if you improve it, okay, yeah. Um, how about getting rid of aging? Like I said, get rid of ugliness. You know, just have good-looking people that stay young forever, that are all smart and non-violent, and you know, all that. Why don't you think that's a good idea? You know, I mean, if you can just target, just target the genes that are responsible for this, and just modify them in your zygote. You said, I thought you would have told me Asians are smart, let them immigrate in Europe. Oh yeah, yeah. But my point is, how about you just modify the genes that are responsible for intelligence and make Europeans smarter? Like just have a bunch of really smart Europeans, okay? And and you also make sure that it doesn't, correlate with, the negative stuff, because often there's some diseases that are also correlated, like in Ashkenazi Jews. They tend to have higher, like Tay-Sachs disease is common in Ashkenazi Jews, and because it's a disease that's related to myelin, and myelin, of course, is a part of the, it's a sheath around the neurons, around the axons of the neurons. So there are basically lots of diseases related to myelin in Ashkenazi Jews, because when they're like heterozygote for that gene, there's actually an advantage in intelligence. But then when you have like a homozygote, so when you've got both of those alleles, both of those variants of that genes, then you get a recessive disease like Tay-Sachs disease. And that is largely why Ashkenazi Jews are both smarter and tend to have more myelin diseases. You say, I'm not in favor of that, but Chinese will maybe force us to use improvation of IQ. Okay, so you're not in favor of that? But why wouldn't you be? Why wouldn't you be in favor of improving IQ? Like, why don't you? Because I think right now it's a problem. Most people are still very irrational. I think they could definitely benefit from more rationality, especially even more so than IQ. But like, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you do it? And you just make sure that people. You say it's a bit scary to change the humankind. Yeah, but you just do it. You don't do it everyone at once. You just do a few kids, and you make sure that they're not going to be. They're not going to be like humankind is changing anyway. There's evolution that's happening all the time. Like literally, like I said, it's the fact that there are different like skin colors is a result of natural changes through natural selection. The fact that like Ashkenazi Jews are smarter is also a result of selection, right? It was also a change. So there's going to be a change in any case. But don't you think it's better if you actually can control that change? I think it's much better that you actually scientifically target what you're doing so that you actually know exactly the result you're going to have. I think it's much better than just leaving it to chance and to selection, and just like to breeding selection. So yeah, you don't have an opinion, a rigid opinion on that. Okay.
Alternatifs, de zététiciens authentiques, libérés des présupposés égalitaristes et des tabous de notre société. Depuis que j'ai commencé à publier des vidéos sur YouTube, plusieurs personnes intéressées par mon avis et mon travail m'ont proposé d'y participer de différentes façons. Cela m'a donné l'idée de créer un site internet et d'initier un groupe de réflexion en accord avec la méthode et la connaissance scientifique. Le cercle Cobalt, zététiciens hérétiques. Habituellement, les zététiciens sont prompts à traiter des sujets comme l'homéopathie, la voyance, la pyramidologie ou encore l'ufologie. Mais étonnamment, il n'en existe aucun qui souhaite traiter de sujets plus glissants, moins consensuels, mais tout aussi intéressants d'un point de vue zététique. Par exemple, parler des pseudosciences, comme le marxisme, la sociologie ou des théories du genre. D'escrocs comme René Girard, Foucault, ou encore plus récemment Précile Touraine. En général, toutes les pseudosciences et autres escroqueries intellectuelles ont pour caractéristique majeure la négation de la réalité. Par exemple, l'idée folle que le sexe et la race des individus seraient le produit de l'imaginaire collectif, une simple construction sociale. Pour ma part, je me suis donné pour objectif de traiter de la question de l'existence des races humaines. Mais l'objectif du cercle Cobalt est bien plus large, celui de la critique du modèle standard des sciences sociales.
Okay, so then he's got a bunch of videos. So, of course, it's in French. And it looks like there's like at least one person who's, yeah, it's in French, and it looks like I've got another. Is there anybody else here? It says I've got 3 viewers, so presumably there's somebody else. But yeah, there's lots of. I'm gonna watch it, but maybe not now. But it looks interesting. Yeah, I thank you for showing me this. But this is the thing. There's lots of. Oh, it's your opinion. How long is it? Okay, I'll have a look. La ligne communautaire européenne expliquée en moins de 15, expliquée en moins de 15 minutes. Well, I had a look at your European thing. I had a look at that. I think it's still open, but I don't know where it is now. Your European Party program. I like, you know what I believe in, right? So I like some of the stuff I liked, some of it I didn't. Yeah. Well, is there anybody else watching? Because otherwise we can just watch this. Maybe there's probably no subtitles. Yeah, no subtitles.
Donc je vais dire en quelques mots, je vais rappeler en fait ce qu'est le communautarisme parce qu'apparemment c'est pas encore clair pour tout le monde. Et il y a peut-être des gens qui nous écoutent qui ne font pas partie de la communauté. Je me permets de donner encore un lien vers la communauté parce que c'est important pour nous, lesbraves.org. Je précise que ce...
And also, if you believe in like a sort of European, do you actually support that? The idea of a European, because you sent me that, right? That European party thing for the sort of a somewhat, for that sort of a pan-European but a sort of conservative European society. Did you? What do you think about that? Because I mean, I get the impression that you're also very much a sort of a French nationalist as well. So would you be in favor or opposed to that? You say no is just a program that you looked. So no, I'm guessing you're not in favor of that, right? Like you wouldn't be in favor of a complete unification of like all European countries. I imagine you wouldn't be in favor of that.
Pour toutes les questions d'organisation, entrer dans une section, etc. Il ne faut pas me contacter moi, il faut passer par ce site parce que je ne suis pas l'organisateur en fait. Je suis pas je suis le communicant, je suis on va dire le représentant image et celui qui a lancé ce mouvement, qui le coordonne si on veut, mais je ne suis pas sur place déjà en France et je ne suis pas celui qui organise les rencontres. Donc c'est lesbraves.org.
You say, but currently French doesn't mean anything anymore. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I see what you mean. But so what would you be in favor of? You don't know what you think about Europeanism. Okay.
Communautarisme.
Well, I mean, I prefer I want more unification, right? So, I mean, I prefer that to nationalism of each country within Europe. But of course, I prefer just as universalism, right? But I'm sort of the opposite of the independentists. I want more merging. I want more merging of different things. So, I like the idea of merging the different countries in Europe. Yeah.
C'est une solution qui est envisagée, qui a été envisagée. On n'est pas les premiers à y avoir pensé. Il y a eu Terrepec notamment et d'autres exemples en France. De certaine manière, le scoutisme européen est aussi une forme de communautarisme. Il y a un communautarisme dans les églises. Par exemple, les cathos traditionnalistes forment une communauté à part entière. Et nous, on voulait une communauté avec un plus grand dénominateur commun qui est l'appartenance culturelle et ethnique à l'histoire de l'Europe. Donc, on s'est lancé avec... Et c'est là la rupture avec d'autres mouvements nationaux qu'on a introduits en 2016 avec Yann Mercado et moi, que je poursuis à travers maintenant les Braves. C'est cette idée qu'en fait, le combat politique en France, pour nous, hein, ça n'engage que nous, et ça n'empêche pas que j'ai du respect pour Thomas Joly, j'ai du respect pour Thomas Ferrier, et leurs idées sont toujours importantes, et peut-être que je me trompe, donc il faut aussi ne pas mettre toutes les œufs dans le même panier. Nous considérons que le combat politique en France est perdu. C'est-à-dire qu'en fait, nos idées, hein, attention, hein, pas les idées du RN, et pas le programme du RN, nos idées, notre programme, c'est-à-dire la France blanche dans une Europe européenne, et l'arrêt de l'immigration et la remigration. D'accord, que ça, c'est pas au programme du RN, même s'il gagnait. D'accord. Bon, ça, politiquement, c'est pas possible à mettre en place pour l'instant. Et donc, on essaie de trouver une autre solution. L'autre solution, c'est de faire un autre plan. On dit, voilà, sur le moment, on est niqué, et avant de gagner, on va perdre. On va être en minorité ethnique, on va de plus en plus avoir des gens comme Macron, ou pire, qui vont être élus. Politiquement, on va l'avoir dans l'os. Il faut qu'on prépare l'après, c'est-à-dire la France d'après, la France remplacée en fait. La France actuellement est en voie de remplacement, excusez-moi, et demain, elle sera la France remplacée. Ok, Robin. Donc là, qu'est-ce qu'on a ? On a, excusez-moi, j'étais un peu troublé parce qu'il y a beaucoup de messages qui sont apparus. Dans mon exposé, j'étais troublé, mais ce que je veux dire, c'est que le communautarisme, c'est regarder comment fonctionnent les autres communautés, en particulier la communauté maghrébino-musulmane et la communauté juive, et voir quels sont leurs fonctionnements. Comment arrive-t-il à gagner ? Comment arrive-t-il à peser dans la société ? Alors, les musulmans le font en partie par la coercition. Qu'est-ce que c'est la coercition ? C'est que voilà, tu critiques le prophète, à un moment donné, tu as un Charlie Hebdo sur ta gueule. Donc nous, c'est pas ce qui nous intéresse. Et quand même des blancs se mettraient à faire ça, la société serait tellement contre eux qu'en réalité, ce serait contre-productif. Et je vous le dis clairement, c'est ce que je crois vraiment, au-delà de l'aspect moral. Mais nous, ce qu'on voit, c'est par exemple, on prend deux exemples, le halal à la cantine et le port du voile. Et bien en fait, comment les musulmans ont pesé sur la société ? La démographie, les conversions aux idées. Des idées n'ont pas besoin d'être des idées religieuses, ça peut aussi être des idées communautaires, des idées ethniques, d'accord ? Et refus, abstention, par exemple, de pas aller à l'école. Vous imaginez une classe où il y a 2 tiers des élèves.
Mais je suis d'accord. Moi, je crois qu'il faut interdire. On peut interdire le halal. Là, ça, je suis d'accord. Parce que c'est juste par rapport au bien-être animal. Moi, ça absolument. Là, on peut. On peut dire non, quoi. Là, je veux dire, il y a liberté de religion, oui, mais je veux dire, on peut pas faire tout au nom de la liberté de religion. Je veux dire, l'islam, il dit aussi qu'on peut tuer tous les infidèles. Donc après, au nom de la religion, finalement, les musulmans, ils auraient le droit de tuer tout le monde qui est pas musulman. Donc après, voilà. Enfin, moi, je crois, on peut très bien interdire tout ce qui est viande halal. Ça, oui. Le voile, je suis un peu moins d'accord parce que le voile, enfin, en plus, c'est un truc chrétien aussi, le voile. Enfin, il y a beaucoup de gens qui portaient le voile.
Qui sont des musulmans, si on leur refuse d'aller à la piscine en voile, ils vont plus à l'école, ça pose des problèmes. Mais en fait, on peut poser sur la société comme ça, et ça marche quoi ? Ça marche par la force du nombre, par l'organisation, par le fait de tenir une position. D'accord ? Voilà, par exemple, c'est dans un village, le maire veut que l'église soit détruite ou bien qu'elle soit transformée en mosquée. Si tous les habitants s'en foutent, ce sera détruit, d'accord ? Ça va être transformé en mosquée, ça va être détruit. Si tous les habitants sont contre, je peux vous assurer que ça n'aura pas lieu, d'accord ? Donc en fait, pour peser dans la société, il faut être un groupe uni, solide et massif en volume. Et ça.
Je suis parti, Charles. Je crois que je vais relancer le stream pour avoir plus de gens. Je sais pas pourquoi quand j'arrête et puis je reprends ça, il y a plus de gens qui viennent.